You see, your fight for survival starts right now.
You have all the weapons you need. Now fight.
Woo! Yeah.
I almost lost the tab. I almost pulled a U and didn't get it in time.
I'm trying something new where I'm not gonna try and hold the tab the whole time. I'm gonna try and just open it right on 0.
Okay.
It's worked 2 weeks in a row now.
Interesting.
We will try for a third next week.
Yeah. Now it's just a coincidence, but next time it'll actually be a
right.
trend.
now that I've acknowledged my I lost the word. Fuck.
Anyway, welcome to Movie Boners.
Hey everybody.
The beer I'm drinking is relatively relevant to today's episode. It's a new one from New Belgium Brewery, which is here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And it's called Citrus Rescue. And it's a citrus IPA brewed with perfectly good but imperfect looking fruit from the Imperfect Foods Company, whatever that means. And it's a citrusy IPA. It's very juicy. You would not like it, but it has orange juice and orange peel in an IPA, and it's pretty good, I think.
That sounds terrible.
It's like a beer mosa in a can, kind of.
Yeah.
For those of you who are not trashy and have never had a beer mosa, that's where you add orange juice to beer and you pretend like it's as cool as a mimosa with champagne, but it's for us, lower budget people.
I have no way to follow that up with. I tried to find something that would also be relevant, so I am drinking Local Blonde.
Okay. Very clever.
Yeah, fuck you.
My
beer wins again.
I definitely could have or should have gone with a blonde, something that would have made sense.
I felt like it was so obvious.
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah.
It didn't catch my eye. I really didn't click in my little pea brain.
But it's from Texas Beer Company. I've had a few of their stuff. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's a blonde ale, so it's pretty light.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep.
All right. Before we get into the episode, couple of topics. Number one, we have merch. My merch finally came. You may have noticed. I have a little hoodie. It has a hood and everything. This is the basic hoodie. So we have 2 levels of hoodies we're trying out. The basic one is pretty nice, honestly. I am always annoyed at how freaking expensive hoodies are. Yes. Especially from bands and stuff that I like. They're like, here's a hoodie. It's $60. I'm like, damn. So this is $28 or something. We've got it as cheap as possible. $28 for the cheap one. It doesn't have things on the whatever this is, a string. The little, what are those things called on the ends of your shoelaces?
A tassel.
Sure, a tassel is a girly way to say it.
You can't judge the word used when you're like this thing.
This I didn't choose a dumb word. I chose no word at all.
You know what?
But it's pretty good. It's definitely worth $20. The printing is nice and straight. That we do have a more premium hoodie. The color I liked just came back into stock, so we might get one of those too because my wife wears all my hoodies, so I'm going to need a second one. But the premium one has a nicer hood that's got the 2 stitches. I don't know what I'm even describing. You'd have to look at it. But go check out our merch. Hoodies, stickers, t-shirts, and a glass draft, whatever you call that, pint glass.
Yep.
And then other things that we've been doing. Well, one, I can't wait for next month. We're almost to the end of January. Well, at the end of January. So we're almost to February, which means that movies are going to start releasing that are in our draft.
Yes.
And
I already have my ticket to one of my movies.
Are you going to see Jackass?
Fuck yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I am so excited.
I need to see it as well. I'm very excited for that. I'm excited for Death on the Nile, which is neither of those are my movies, so that's kind of a downer. But you are definitely going to get out into an early lead in February. That's very clear.
But my draft took a huge blow like 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Fucking Paramount being like, we need to postpone Mission Impossible 7 another year because we're dumb.
Yeah, if you don't follow us on social media, during the week after we did our draft, immediately after we did our draft, Mission Impossible 7 was delayed from this September to next July. So that's the first and only movie so far that's gotten bumped. It's still early, obviously. Nothing's actually been released, but you will dominate February. I'm pretty confident I will catch up in March, though. So the next couple months will be very interesting. We'll be checking in where we're at, what the box office is at, what the scores are at.
Yep.
Every week. So I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it should be real interesting headed into February.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for January movies that are not Scream because we omitted that one, considering we had both already seen it when we started our draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And I'm like, man, January's got shit to be. There's nothing in January.
Yeah. My wife keeps asking me, she's like, when does Scream come out? Because I need to see it again. We need to own it. I need to watch it. And I'm like, it's not out yet. They're not streaming it. I'm so sorry.
It'll still be a little bit.
Yeah. So, speaking of watching new things, though, have you watched any? I know you've watched new things. I'm very excited to hear about one of them. I have not really watched anything new. I don't think I've really watched anything new. Everything that I've watched new is for next week's episode, so I don't really have anything to talk about, I don't think.
Yeah, I haven't started that yet. My goal was to actually start that this morning, but I decided to be lazy and not do any podcast-related stuff today. I felt like, nope, I'm just going to lounge on the couch and binge watch Friends.
Nice.
Because I'm almost done with the series. And, I did start watching, I know I'm 2 seasons behind, whatever. But I did finally sit down and start watching The Boys.
Oh, yeah. Prime. I've heard great things. I have not seen it yet.
It is pretty great. Jake, you would love the shit out of this show. It is your show. Every episode I'm like, the screams, Jake. Just all over the place. The screams, Jake.
That's totally the vibe I get from the memes of the show I see.
Yes. I am really genuinely enjoying it. And it's one of those where I'm like, yeah, I probably should have just watched this when it first came out. So I've loved that. And then I watched the new Ben Affleck film on Prime as well. It's called The Tender Bar. It's directed by George Clooney. It's just a nice little drama movie, a coming-of-age story about this kid named JR, or Junior, who is raised in his grandfather's house with his whole family that comes and goes because they're all poor and have to rotate. And his uncle, Charlie, played by Ben Affleck, runs this bar called Dickens, and he just kind of uses his uncle as his father figure mentor guy. I enjoyed the hell out of The Tender Bar. If you want something that's just peaceful and positive, especially with all the shit that we live in these days where nothing is good, it seems.
Escape from life, yeah.
Yeah. The Tender Bar was a really nice, peaceful, just calming movie. It's not the greatest movie.
Okay.
It's fantastic and amazing when Junior is a kid, a really small kid.
Yeah.
The stuff when he's going to college, that whole part of the movie, I was like, oh, this part kind of blows. It's not bad, but you're it loses its heart during all that, or at least it felt like it did. But it's still worth a watch. Check it out. It's Ben Affleck, dude. The more and more I watch of Affleck's stuff, even revisiting his older movies, I'm like, man,
yeah,
I'm genuinely a Ben Affleck fan. I love this guy. So he does a really great job in this movie. It's super good. His role is super good.
Okay.
And then I decided to, because you hear about it everywhere, and I was like, well, I absolutely adore the entire cast. This, like, it has so many great things going for it. It's a satire on the end of the world, kind of a political satire. I really like Adam McKay's political satire. I mean, Vice is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
So I sat down and finally watched Don't Look Up. And what a steaming pile of wasted talent and satire, piece of shit, stupid fucking long movie that was. Fuck that movie. It's so bad. It's so bad. At no point during that film did I even chuckle. I was so mad during that whole movie. You know how bad that movie got? I didn't even give a shit about spoilers. I immediately went on IMDb to be like, all right, who got like suckered into doing this? Because this is just the worst ensemble film I think I've seen in a long time. Didn't even give a shit about spoilers. And for those that know me pretty well, I hate spoilers. Yeah. Even movies that I know other people will never watch, I tend to not give them spoilers. Don't Look Up. I did not care. I was like, well, all right, so that's the end. That's fucking stupid, but okay. I was so mad. And to the point where I did have to post something on Instagram, just like, I hate this movie. It's like, this is such a bad movie. And I'm like looking at what other people had to say. People are thinking it's hilarious and a great, like, poignant film. And I'm like, no. This movie is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
That's amazing. Oh. That's we got to your story, we got a response or two from list followers, and that seemed to be the consensus as well. They're like, I hate this freaking movie.
It's so bad. I could
like you, I was very intrigued by the cast. Obviously, it seemed like the cast looked great. It seemed like a David O. Russell like level of just wild amount of superstars.
Dude, it should have been amazing.
But there was just something about that trailer that made me uneasy or just unsure that it would be good. So I was like, I'll just not yet, maybe someday. But I'm not really concerned about it. And then but after you said that, I was like, nope, pass, hard pass.
It's so bad. Like, it's been a while since I have hated a movie just so passionately, but 2022, fuck Don't Look Up. It's so fucking stupid.
All right.
Yep. Hated that movie.
Well, maybe it will age better with time. It may be hated originally, but find people that actually like it later on.
You know how sometimes you watch a movie that's just so bad, and like you and I experience this all the time, where we're like, oh, I didn't care for that one. And then we watch it again. We're like, oh no, that movie's amazing.
Like The Witch.
Like The Witch or anything else really.
Yeah.
But sometimes you watch a movie that's so bad that you just immediately know to your core, like, I cannot find a positive thing in this whole movie. And dude, so it should be super funny. The satire should have worked, but it turns out, and I like it when actors all branch out, right? Try new things. It's good for you. Continue doing that. But it turns out, as much as I love like Leonardo DiCaprio, as much as I love Jennifer Lawrence and Meryl Streep, they're not funny people. And every joke that is in the movie feels so forced. And they try to play it the smart way where they're like playing it real. They're not trying to be funny. Yeah. And that usually works when you're like actually a funny person. It works really well. But it turns out that this whole cast is just not funny. Yeah. Even Jonah Hill, who I was like, oh, sweet, Jonah Hill's in this. He's like chief of staff to the president, who's his mom. I was like, that should be a hilarious, like, he showed up and I was happy. I was like, sweet, Jonah Hill's going to save the movie. Yeah. And then he was just really annoying. And I was like, shit, I hate Jonah Hill in this movie.
Oh, no. Yeah.
It's like, and I was excited to see him and DiCaprio working together because I love Wolf of Wall Street. and then they're just annoying and they don't really do anything together. Oh my God. I didn't even there was no chuckling. I didn't smile. The movie is 2.5 fucking hours long.
Damn.
That feels like a 6-hour film.
Yeah.
Seriously, halfway through the movie, I'm like, we've got to be getting close to the ending. So I paused it to see the timeline. I'm like, fuck, I have a whole nother half of the film. Are you kidding me?
Oh man. Yeah, that's not great.
So bad. Don't watch it, Jake.
Okay.
I feel like the movie would just infuriate you.
I appreciate you taking one for the team. I will dodge that bullet.
Oh, it's so bad. But luckily, that was only one big hiccup in this last week because I got to watch a movie a few times that I actually enjoy.
There you go.
So,
yeah. So what? I just had a brain aneurysm. What just happened?
Jake is seizuring.
Okay, so let's try that again. I'm excited to talk about this episode. I know you're excited to talk about this episode.
Yeah.
You texted me the other day and you were like, every time I watch a Zack Snyder movie, I just want to binge all of his stuff.
All of his filmography.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is such a distinct and powerful vibe to his movies that I totally get that. I feel the same way. They're highly stylized. The style he does is very bold. It's very different. I was trying to think about it, and I think I couldn't think of another director that's as specific in their style as Zack Snyder is, other than maybe Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson is very specific, very bold. A lot of other directors are more, they have certain specific things they do, signature things like Snyder and everybody else does, but they're not as specific or easily identifiable. I would say when it comes to directors like Wes Anderson or Snyder, they're the kind of filmmakers whose style, you can just say the name and people immediately know the style, what the movie will essentially look like. They know the tone of the film. They know all the little stylized stuff that director does that just encompasses the whole film. Yeah. And is used as a tool to tell the story. Those two directors are very set apart from everyone else just because you can say their name to anyone who has watched their films or just movie fans in general, and they immediately know, oh, I know what kind of movie that is. You could say the same thing about Tim Burton. Everyone knows what all of his movies feel like. You can't even say that though about Spielberg. Right. You can't you can't very
say that.
Less stylized, more clean or traditional directors Spielberg or Ron Howard, or even Tarantino's pretty classic style. He just throws in a lot of signature things and obviously more violence occasionally, bursts of violence, long dialogue, things like that. But from a visual imagery perspective, very classic.
Yeah. So Snyder is definitely apart from a lot of people. And yes, you summed it up too, where you're like, yep, Snyder films are a vibe. And it's true. I've watched Sucker Punch 3 times this week just in preparation for this episode. And all 3 times I was like, well, let's see here. Each of his movies is about 3 hours long. Could I watch his whole filmography, watch The Boys, continue binging Friends, and get prepped for this episode all this week? It's like, no, you probably can't.
Not if I need to sleep at any point.
Right. Oh, yeah. And go to work full time.
Oh, yeah.
Could I do this? I genuinely thought about it, folks, because, and it's true. It doesn't matter if I'm watching Man of Steel or Snyder's Justice League or whatever, or Watchmen. If I try to just watch one of his movies, I feel compelled just to I feel like I'm doing him an injustice by not just binging his whole filmography. Yeah. But I know that's not a thing.
You could say that you're a fanboy. I think that's going to be a thread through this episode. Obviously, we are both unapologetically in love with Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
He's not for everybody. A lot of people take issue with the style, and it's because when you have a strong style like that, it's going to be divisive in certain ways. Like
it can be polarizing. I will give the people that are not big Snyder fans, I kind of get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, his visual cues, how his gradients, the dark stories that he tends to tell, they're not for everyone.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah. Some people complain about the slow motion. He uses a lot of slow motion. I personally think slow motion is fucking awesome, especially when it lets you focus on all the little details that you would miss if it was normal speed.
And, you know, his slow motion is always used on some like epic shot or during some crazy sequence where it's used to emphasize, and I love it. I'm all for his use of slow-mo. I really am.
Yeah. No, totally agreed. And so I think it's very interesting, all of his other movies that you mentioned. Sucker Punch kind of stands out as a lot of his movies are criticized, but Sucker Punch was especially criticized when it first came out by critics and fans and all this. It was rotten on Rotten Tomatoes and all that stuff. It stands out especially because it's the only original story he's ever made after he did Dawn of the Dead, which is obviously a remake of the Romero classic, and 300 and Watchmen. He directed and co-wrote Sucker Punch, which is original and interesting and a lot deeper than most people give it credit for.
Yeah, it's a very dark film. When I was prepping for it, one funny thing that I came across is that the whole cast and the crew of the film actually described the movie as One Flew Over the Matrix. And when I was watching it, I was like, that fits. Because it's not a feel-good film. It's a pretty, like, devastating movie for what it hints at or shows you.
Right.
The environment that these women are put in is so toxic and so bad. So I got it. I was like, immediately when I read that was how the cast and crew described it, I was like, yep, I get it. Because, like, the whole film is inside someone's head. It's you kind of forget, like, what's reality and what's not.
Right. There's several layers to it, and it's pretty much entirely about abuse. So not the brightest story in the world. Right.
But I genuinely, I enjoyed it the first time I saw it, and that was after hearing all the trash talk on it and hearing how poorly received it was. And so when I sat down to watch it that first time years ago, I kind of sat down expecting like, oh, I'm going to hate this movie, but let's just see how bad it actually is. And then I was like, this movie's kind of cool. Like, this is an interesting story. Why did people hate this movie so much? If you hated it, whatever. We loved it. So
I also think it's the kind of movie that I'm noticing more and more people describing liking now. Like, I think more and more people are finding it and having that experience, realizing that, it is actually pretty good. I think it was, when it first came out especially, it was criticized heavily for being overly sexualized and misogynistic and all this stuff, which, if you've seen the film, you should know that it's pretty much the opposite of that. And so anybody that complained about it didn't see the movie. They either saw the poster or the trailer or something.
Or they read some trolls' comments online. And
Yeah. And so it becomes extremely obvious that you haven't seen the movie and you don't know the message of the movie. This movie should be, especially nowadays, in a post-Me Too world, in when people are policing people on the internet for slut shaming, it should be a fucking anthem for like abuse survivors and all this stuff, or people who are in those situations, or people who have gotten out or dealing with trauma of those situations. It's a very specific and powerful movie if you actually see it.
Yeah, the idea of these women solely focusing on survival and focusing on how do we not only survive this situation, but how do we actually finally get away from it, finding that freedom for it and fighting for that freedom for their lives. I take the film as very powerful, very empowering for women. I saw a thing with Jenna Malone, who plays Rocket in Sucker Punch, and she did describe it. I forget like the first word she used for it. She had like a full description, but she did call this movie like it's one of the most important feminist films out there just because of the celebration of women that the movie is. Yes, their outfits are kind of, I guess you could say, off-putting if you are more on the conservative side of things or whatever. But if you actually watch the movie, like Jake just said, you understand why they're in the outfits they're wearing, because the whole film takes place in a brothel, which is actually... so we're going to spoil the shit out of the film in case you didn't know or haven't listened to any of our other deep dives. Starting the spoilers now.
Go see Sucker Punch.
The whole thing, like the brothel that the film takes place in, or this club, it's a made-up setting. Like it's all inside Baby Doll's mind. She's created this whole world based off of her experience for 5 days in the Lennox house, which is this mental institution. So they use the brothel to kind of over exaggerate like that kind of club setting or what these women are doing, but it's to the point where it lets you have an understanding of, the reality, though, they might not be like selling themselves or putting on huge dance numbers for these high class clients. They're being forced to do this by this super evil, crazy, creepy, so unnerving Oscar Isaac in Sucker Punch. Deserves more credit as being such a great villain because he makes you so squirmy from the get-go.
It had to be his breakout role. He had a couple of roles before this in Russell Crowe movies. He was Lil Jon in the 2010 Robin Hood, and I think he was in Body of Lies also. But this was his other, I think, main role, and he flexes nuts as like an actor in this movie.
Yes, he does. I like it, especially when it comes to like the bad guys of a film. If your villain or your bad guy can make the audience just feel uneasy or gross every time you're on screen, I feel the actor is doing their job perfectly. Like when you are able to separate the actor from the character and just fully like feel affected by the character, that's a cool thing to have happen. And it works best when it's a villain. Because you're supposed to hate the villain. You're supposed to feel gross about them.
Right.
And he's this sad orderly who kind of enforces abuse in a mental institution. It's so
he's certainly the head of this abusive environment, doing very morally terrible things for money and for just his own enjoyment. To these women who are vulnerable because he's obviously in a position of power over them as the guy who's enforcing the rules in this asylum. But it also translates to the fantasy world in the club that she has in her mind, where he's like the owner of the club or the pimp or whatever you want to call him. And so there's there's essentially three different layers to the movie, where there's reality where they're in the asylum. There's the club fantasy world, which is a mirror image of the actual world. Everything that happens in it happens in the other one, and the conversations in one refer to things in the other one, but in a way that you don't exactly see at all times until you actually end up getting around to seeing it. And then even deeper than that, there's a action fantasy realm when she's dancing, where instead of showing her dancing, they show her in her mind fighting in these really awesome sequences. And so there's kind of three different layers that all relate to each other and mean different things to them. And so I think visually that's a big deal. and they're going back and trying to put a bow on the outfit thing, them being dressed that way and being, yes, they are dressed sexily, they're attractive, and they wear these like what you would expect.
Did you just say sexily?
So that's a word, right?
I don't know.
We're not playing Scrabble. It's close enough. You know what I meant. But they are dressed that way intentionally. And this movie, I think, was put out there this way intentionally. And so for people to criticize it for being this thing is extremely interesting, especially when the actual message of the movie is a subversive attack on the thing that they're criticizing it for. If that makes sense. Like they're criticizing it for being this thing while it's simultaneously criticizing things for being that thing. So they're on the same team, which is kind of the funny thing.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Sucker Punch and you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? So the essential story of the movie is the title character, who is named Baby Doll in the fantasy world. You never actually find out her real name.
Right.
But she is referred to as Baby Doll. Her mother dies, and due to her trauma and her crazy abusive stepfather, she accidentally murders her sister and is incarcerated and put into this mental institution called the Lennox House, where she has 5 days before she is scheduled for a lobotomy, so that she will have zero recollection of any event, especially her stepfather, who just wants all the money from her dead mom's will and everything from that. Yeah,
the mom left it all to the two daughters, and so he puts her into there because the second daughter's dead. He puts her in there and then pays off Oscar Isaac's character to forge the actual doctor's signature and get her a lobotomy, so she kind of forgets everything and he doesn't have to worry about her anymore.
And during the course of the film, Baby Doll creates this whole fantasy where it goes double fantasy, like Jake said, where like you have just the world that's fantastical mirror image of the real world, which is one of my favorite details in it. How like the gates and some of the doorways in the brothel are still the exact same as the Lennox house. And then she goes even farther into her fantasy world and creates a whole second one where she does actual battles and wars. But they all it all stems from what actually happens in the Lennox house, which is an interesting little note. But that's essentially the movie, and she tries to plot a plan to escape with the four other girls. That's essentially what Sucker Punch is about on the outside, but the full story is survival, the lengths your mind will go to protect you from trauma. How far can someone push themselves? What are you willing to do? There's a lot of narrative in Sucker Punch that's directly to you, the audience. So the narration is breaking the fourth wall in the beginning and the very end about here, the opening is all about guardian angels and different forms that a guardian angel can be. It might not be divine or whatever, but you should probably pay attention to the stuff coming into your life. And then the final one is, all about accountability and
and encouragement ultimately.
And encouragement. It's not accountability in a negative light. It's accountability and you need to understand you have tools, you have the means to do this stuff. So do it. That's the main thesis of the movie, which comes up in the middle and is repeated at the very end, which is you have all of the weapons you need. You fight. You should fight. No one is coming to save you, essentially. You can save yourself. And it's encouraging people, the audience especially, that if you're in a situation, if you are being abused, if you're being trafficked, if you've gotten out of that, but you're still dealing with the trauma, don't give up. It's up to you. You have everything you need inside of you, even if you don't have extreme strength or actual guns and swords and stuff. You have what you need, whether it's patience or wisdom or the ability to create art or
or sexuality like these girls have attractiveness and the ability to dance and these kinds of things. Those are their weapons that they use to escape, to fight, to get out of this situation. And so I think that's incredibly interesting and very, very hopeful and positive as well. Yeah,
no, I take the film, although I said earlier, like, it's not necessarily a feel-good movie, because it's not. There's some pretty, like, it's a very dark story, but you can come away from it still feeling some kind of sense of empowerment, which is really cool how Snyder does it. He does this with almost every one of his films, where he will give you one of the darkest stories. He will put his characters and you, the audience, through some crazy shit. The ending might not be like the most, but even when it ends, you sit there for a minute and you're kind of like, oh, I kind of feel like you feel that glimmer, that little like hint of hope, or maybe not even a hint, just a better grasp of there's always that hope out there. I think my favorite example is actually how he ends Watchmen with the song and the diary. I think Sucker Punch does that same kind of thing with the bus, where you get that like, okay, there's, but we'll get to that, folks. Don't worry. We'll get. Yeah,
I think Snyder does an incredible job in all of his movies of understanding how human beings relate to heroes and stories and narratives and even myths and lore and things like that. He understands how humans connect to that and uses that in all of his movies. And so he is inspired by a lot of that old mythology and stuff like that, that has stood the test of time. Even obviously comic books are kind of modern mythology and have a lot of similarities in that. He does the same sort of thing with these. The best stories are grounded and real and scary and dark, but there's always a hero, there's hope, there's good in there that you can overcome the evil with, ultimately.
Yeah. I think, I mean, Snyder's he's just become one of my all-time favorites. I know everyone was introduced to him with 300. When that movie came out, I remember being pretty skeptical. I was like, I don't know, because the visual of it looked different to me. It looked oh, this is so different. But I will never forget my introduction to, sorry. Technically, my introduction to him was Dawn of the Dead, his remake, but that one...
Way less stylized.
And you kind of like... Dawn of the Dead is one of those movies where it was his first big Hollywood budget film, and you don't really focus on the director. You just like, you're fully invested into the movie, and it's a fun remake.
Yeah.
It's a great remake, actually. I love his Dawn of the Dead.
And being a remake, you are focused as much on how close are you to the original director.
Right. Like, what are you doing to honor the original? Obviously, we don't want a shot for shot, but don't.
If you are too different, people will get upset.
Yeah. Which he did get flack because his zombies ran. I personally love his zombies, but this isn't about Dawn of the Dead. But I remember, like, when I finally sat down and watched 300, when I went to the theater and watched that film and got to see Snyder's actual, like, oh no, this is his style. This is his vision for filmmaking and storytelling. I love the slower pace that he'll take with letting the story develop and letting you really soak in the environment. I really respect that. But I remember, 300... I know it's on your war list, wasn't it?
I think it was on my first action adventure list.
I know it was on one of your lists. Anyways, that movie is still like it's a powerful fucking film.
Yeah.
And for people to immediately like, oh shit, like who's the Zack Snyder guy?
The world took notice all of a sudden.
Yeah, immediately. And I do come across people that hated 300, and I'm like, I don't quite get that. because it's such a cool film, but you do you, I guess. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that movie really and to see him continue his actual vision in filmmaking and these stories that he's telling, I have such respect for him as a filmmaker, and I've just become such a bigger fan of his as his career progresses. I know you and I have had so many fanboy moments when it comes to Zack Snyder, especially in the last couple of years.
And a big part of that is he is at the center of the conversation. If you were talking about the struggle between visionary creators and the powers that be, as far as producers and
studios,
studio funding and censorship and just being someone who wants to make something the way they want it made because they have a vision for it, and then not being able to, whether it's cutting it for time or content, or the studio says, oh, we want to go in another direction, or you're not funny enough, or whatever. That is so discouraging or disheartening. And so I love that Zack Snyder continues to push against that. I think that's so important for everybody, no matter what you're making. Just having that be the conversation is important. But then him finally getting out from under the whole Warner Brothers situation and being able to hopefully do more of what he wants in the future is encouraging also.
Well, it's kind of... Zack Snyder's career is so interesting to follow because it is affecting other huge names in the industry now. His battle with Warner Brothers has become so public. And then the whole idea of Warner Brothers keeps wanting to change how their directors are making films. They're constantly keeping both hands in the cookie jar and trying to keep the actual artist out of the cookie jar, no. It's crazy. So Snyder finally gets out from Warner Brothers and signs on with some huge Netflix deals. I can't wait to see what he's got coming with that.
Yeah.
But then as soon as Snyder gets free from them, Christopher Nolan comes out and is I'm fucking done with Warner Brothers. They keep trying to undermine him. They keep trying to tell Nolan, you can't make what you want to make, or if you're going to, we want you to do it this way. He's been battling ever since he came out too. And now he's done with them. He flat out cut all his ties with them.
Yeah.
How do you lose that, man? Yeah. But it's in turn to the disrespect the studio has for the filmmaker, for the artist is so prominent.
Right.
That now we're watching the studio losing filmmakers and coming out. We've got fans that are signing petitions now to boycott Warner Brothers films in general because of how they mishandle the artist's vision. Is primarily with comic book movies, but it's still the artist's visions that Warner Brothers keeps interfering with.
It's the most ridiculous thing to me. It's like if you had a restaurant and you have all these chefs who want to make this amazing stuff. They want to try new things and new dishes that people will like and haven't tried before. And you say, no, you need to make grilled cheese. We've done tests. People like grilled cheese. You can only make grilled cheese. And these creators, good for them, are saying, no, I don't want to do that. I'm leaving. Right. And they should. They should all leave.
They should.
Warner Brothers should be defunct.
And I think Warner Brothers this year or in the next couple of years, I mean, they're a huge power. So I'm not saying they're going to be we're going to watch the crumble or the fall of WB. It's probably not happening, folks. Let's face it.
Soon, but
even if you're someone that signed the boycott or are going to be a part of it, they're Warner Brothers.
Right.
They're still going to make money. You yourself will probably find yourself going to a Warner Brothers film.
Oh, yeah.
It's just... It's one of those things that's kind of inevitable in human nature. We're all going to go see the Batman in March.
You did right. Wild horses can't keep me away from that movie. So
it's going to happen, folks. But what I hope for and think we might actually see is some kind of effect that Warner Brothers, they might lose more contracts with filmmakers or with actors and all this. That could be coming down the line more so.
Right.
Especially if they continue to interfere.
not only are you losing the ones you have, but other ones on the outside, other creators are seeing how the people are being treated in this environment. They're not going to sign up with you. The next generation of creators you have this stigma now attached to you, Warner Brothers, that new content creators are not going to want to work with you for this very reason. And so the well is going to dry up in that sense.
Yeah, at this rate, we're going to see A24 become like the massive conglomerate studio because I was going to be like, they tell crazy fucking stories and don't seem to care about interfering. I mean, they just made a movie about a lamb person thing.
Yeah, they make a lot of crazy stuff, but also everything I've seen from them has been good.
Yeah. And then Netflix has been very vocal of like, no, we don't give notes. Like, you want to make a story? If we take your story on, you're going to make your story. Right.
Since the very beginning, that's kind of always been what attracted people to Netflix, creators to Netflix, has been there's like, we'll give you a shitload of money, make whatever you want. It can be a movie, it can be a series. We don't care, whatever it should be, whatever the vision is, do it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we won't keep doing it, but we'll give it a try.
Right. I mean, you would almost hope to be able to make a film on Netflix more than a show, because they do seem to be like, oh, you got one season of a show and it ended on a cliffhanger? Nah, we're done. Like, let's move on. But even like HBO's been promoting, hey, you want to make your stuff, if we decide to produce it, like, yeah, we want it to be yours. Prime, I think Prime's still kind of iffy. I could see Prime. I'm still waiting for Prime to put something out that's actually like, whoa.
Yeah.
But we'll find out.
Yeah. They have more of a less defined culture, I think, than the other ones.
But, you know, we're going to also see all these other studios. You could take like Paramount or DreamWorks, all these other production companies watching Warner Brothers, because there's a lot of eyes on Warner Brothers these days. Yeah. And I could almost see those other big hitters also being kind of like, you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe we don't lose our filmmakers. Maybe we...
Yeah.
It's okay to give the occasional note, but don't tell a filmmaker, hey, you got to cut out like 35 minutes of actual storyline.
Right. Right. Yeah. You should be paying attention, all of you other people who are in the area, even if you're not under fire now. At least, you know, feel the temperature of the room, that this is where it's going, and for a good reason, I think.
Well, and if these studios don't want to have to completely battle streaming, they're going to have to start listening to the actual audiences, are going to have to actually start listening to filmmakers and be like, oh, audiences actually are okay with sitting through a 3-hour film, or they're actually okay with this aspect, or this will work, you know, because the director's cut, or the, you know, sure, we'll stick with director, because extended cuts tend to not be extended, maybe by like a minute. Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Sometimes the extended cut is like, oh, this was the original cut. Okay.
Yeah.
i.e. Sucker Punch, which we are transitioning back into, folks. Don't worry. This is all part of it, because Warner Brothers did the same shit on Sucker Punch.
Yeah. It all ties back together, because there was a theatrical version of Sucker Punch. I think it is officially called the extended cut of Sucker Punch, which came out later and is 18 minutes longer and seems like it is much more of a pure vision. Closer, certainly closer to the vision than the original was. The original is PG-13. The extended version, it's not. Sucker Punch is so interesting to me because it is so dark. The content of it is so unsettling on so many levels. But if you're looking at exactly what is happening and who is like their dad, the dad is a great example. So you get such a uncomfortable vibe from him from the very beginning. He never like actually touches Baby Doll or her sister.
Yeah.
He never really does anything other than stand there, loosen his necktie, and then take her to the asylum. But it's so clear through the visuals and everything that he's a scumbag, that he's disgusting, that she is going to be abused, or he can't get to her, so he's going to abuse the little sister, and so she needs to save her. And so the fact, I don't know where I was going with this. The fact that all of those, I think I know where you're going with that. All those little things were added back in, like 18 minutes were added back in, but it's still not like hard R level.
No, it does have an official R rating. I should have brought the case over. Give me a second, because the rating reasons are different.
Oh, okay.
It's very funny, and I thought this was interesting. I'll be right back. So the PG-13 rating is PG-13 for thematic material involving sexuality, violence, and combat sequences, and for language.
Okay.
The R-rated version, the extended cut, is sexual content, some violence, and brief language. I think it's funny that the PG-13 has a harsher reasoning than the R rating. And the sexual content, I think it's funny that they highlight sexual content on this movie.
Yeah.
There is no sex.
No.
There is a scene of like two characters kissing.
Yeah. There's conversation about sex where if you are an adult and you know what they're talking about, you know that Baby Doll is a virgin who is being sold to this guy to de-virginize. But that's a very adult conversation. So I guess there's sexual themes.
There's like
not sexual content.
You understand it being a brothel, and the women talk about, like, you know, Jenna Malone's character Rocket takes her to one of the rooms that they work in, and they like Snyder's, the way he tells a story, and kind of back to what you were bringing up with like the understanding you have of certain characters without getting a full history of the character. He does such a great job of just keeping it kind of simple, but the visual cues around you just fill in so many gaps. You know, with the stepdad,
right? You
see him that first time, you see him opening the will and kind of getting discouraged. Immediately, your brain fills in all the gaps of like, you've been abusive, not just recently, but probably the entire time you've been with this family.
Right. The mom doesn't trust you. She doesn't trust you to be a caregiver to the kids. She's leaving everything to her daughters.
Yeah. And you understand, you never see him. I mean, you see him like shove a door open and it pushes Baby Doll to the ground. You see an enlarged button spinning around on the floor. And it's crazy how that button is also a cue that just in your head, just like, oh, here's all the gross details that we're just going to fill in for you. And you're like,
it's a button on the floor, but in your mind, you're going undressing, awkward, like rape.
You fill in all the gaps. But I respect how Snyder does this, because he fills all these gaps and he gives you all the history you actually need without having to show any of the like ultra disgusting stuff, even in the brothel.
Yeah.
The closest thing you get to actually seeing any of the gross stuff is one of the women sitting on the mayor's lap.
Yeah.
And kind of like, saying cuddling or snuggling on him just sounds so wrong, because that implies like consent, and like
she is choosing to kiss him on the neck as a way to distract him.
It's a giant distraction. They have a conversation of doing that to distract him.
The girls come up with a plan, and she has to do that in order to steal the lighter from him.
Yeah. But at no point do you see the women actually taken into the room. You never see like anyone being thrown down onto the bed or any of that.
Undressed even partially.
Yeah, there's no disrobing. There's no... I respect him how he did that.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I'm going to fill the gaps in without actually showing any of the stuff.
Yeah.
You just have an understanding.
It's telling a very sensitive story in a very honest way, and also a very respectful way, which is not... It's uncomfortable, but it's not in a bad way uncomfortable. It's in you get the gist uncomfortable kind of way.
Yeah. So I have such high respect for him, especially his approach for taking this story on and telling this story. I love how he filled all these gaps, and he's done it with almost all of his films.
Yeah. He's a great visual storyteller. A lot of storytellers will tell you everything you need to know. He just shows it to you. And while he's telling you things that you have no idea what the fuck he's even talking about, like they will have several of his movies. Batman vs. Superman especially comes to mind. Sucker Punch especially has these narrations over visuals that you don't know what she's talking about, really. She's talking about guardian angels, and you're like, that's good. You assume the girl talking is the girl you're watching, Baby Doll, that she's being taken in his place. She's talking about guardian angels. Oh, good. She'll be saved. If you rewatch the movie, you realize, oh, that's not Baby Doll talking. This movie,
like at all.
they tell you directly a couple times, this isn't even Baby Doll's story. She's just in it, and it's really Sweet Pea's story. Which is interesting. But I think, he does a great job of showing you everything you need to know instead of just coming out and telling you,
and he'll even throw in, sometimes the dialogue will be kind of vague.
Yeah.
But you get a full scope of like that character's history or relationships through just a little bit of vague dialogue. You just have this overwhelming, like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I think my favorite example of his use with this actually isn't in Sucker Punch. It would be in the Snyder cut of Justice League, between the conversation of Joker and Batman in the nightmare sequence. They don't give you a history of each other, like a full drawn out history. Joker has a few key lines. Batman has like 2 real responses, and you understand, like as a comic book fan, you immediately are just like, oh my God, everything I've read these 2 characters go through is real. Snyder does he's so good at giving you just a full kind of emotional understanding, not just like a basic, oh, I get it, but you feel it like in your core. You feel how deep these characters' stories actually go and how much they've been through, and they can be pretty vague. I find it hard. Like, I get it, he's not for everyone, but as a huge fan of his, I still like find myself questioning, how do people not attach to his stuff more?
Yeah. For me personally, it's exactly, it connects on such a deep level. Like you said, it's not just, oh, I understand this on a mental level. Like in my soul, I understand what these characters are going through, what they're motivated by, and how they overcome it, and everything that happens in the story. I get it. I connect with it. I
think, and I love, like in Sucker Punch, a lot of all that. So, I mean, the whole movie, minus the first 7 minutes, are all in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
Well, first like 7 minutes, and then the last like 5.
Yeah.
That whole gap, and it's a 2-hour film, is all in the fantasy world. So I think it's crazy how he uses like not only the details of the actual mental institution kind of like bleeding into the fantasy world or melding into it, but the dialogue, the situations that all the women go through, talk about, kind of hint about. I feel like Rocket is such a great example of the character she's the most bubbly of the group. She's very like extroverted, but the more times you watch Sucker Punch, I think she might be the most damaged.
Yeah.
And I think all of the extroversion is just her like defense mechanism. It's almost her personal way of rebelling against the trauma that she's going through and has been through. Instead of like letting it beat her down, she's just like, well, fine, fuck you. I'll just, I'll do the polar opposite of what you think I should be doing. Right.
Trying to be as normal as possible, that everything's okay. And she's there to make friends and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like Jenna Malone. She's one of those actresses I have always wished was in more things, because I love her in everything I watch her in. So every time she shows up on screen in Sucker Punch, every time I'm like, yes, there she is.
Yeah, she's great. Even when she in the extended version of Batman versus Superman when she shows up. I'm like, yo, why weren't you in the
right? You're like,
original?
there she is.
Yeah, I was so excited when she was like cast for that, and then she wasn't even in it. They cut her out of the theatrical. Fucking Warner Brothers. Okay, so this is not a podcast about Warner Brothers, though. This is a podcast about Sucker Punch.
But we both knew, and you as our listeners, if you've listened to our show before, you should already understand whenever Snyder's name comes up, Jake and I are going to just go on an anti-WB rant for a little bit.
Yeah. And we don't often talk shop about the Hollywood process, and so I think it was interesting. So it's totally good.
Yeah. But Sucker Punch.
And the other interesting thing, we touched on the sexual content. The violence, I think, is also especially interesting because I was trying to keep track, and I may have missed it, but I'm pretty sure there's only one time you see blood in the movie, and I think it's actually only in the extended cut, if I remember right. But when she, at the very beginning, when she tries to shoot her stepdad or whoever he is, she's very close to him, but she misses him. And then her second shot hits him in the arm, and he like shows the blood on his hand.
Well, he's holding his arm. Yeah. I don't think he shows the camera the blood. The blood that you see is
it's her
from her
sister's
sister.
Blood. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, baby doll goes in. She misses her dad, accidentally hits the steam pipe, which is very interesting because the steam shoots out, and I think that embeds into her mind, and we'll talk about that later. But she does accidentally shoot her sister in the closet, and her sister dies. She sees her sister's blood on her hands. Yeah, I think that's the only time you see any blood in the movie.
So there's
all of the
there's that. And then technically there are two more times. Technically. Okay. The other time is when you see the lobotomy tool get dipped into the sanitizer. There's a little bit of blood on the end of it. And then when you see Blue, Oscar Isaac's actual orderly character, you see blood seeping through the bandage on his shoulder and neck.
Okay.
But none of the blood in the movie is like grotesque. It's not overdone. It's not even like really focused on, except for her hand, but it's in a dark closet. So the only reason you understand it's blood is, one, we've seen that kind of shot in like every drama and action movie ever where someone has blood on their hands.
Right.
But the glistening of it, because it's a pretty dark closet, it's a pretty dark opening. Just the lighting is really dark.
And she shot out the light.
Yeah, you see the glistening on her fingertips, and it's one of those shots where even if the movie was like in black and white, or there wasn't any like real light in that shot, and all you saw was the light glisten, you would understand immediately, oh crap, there's blood on her hands. Yeah. Which literally it's her fault for doing that.
Right. Right. So, good. Best of intentions. Trying to save your sister, she did, but you did the exact opposite of save your sister. So
I do like that you brought up the steam that does play in later, and I do agree with you without even hearing you say your case. Okay. Like, yeah, I think that sticks with her.
Nice. Yeah. It's just one of those things that sticks out to me so intentionally.
Well, he focuses on it.
Yeah, it's the fastest little shot, but you're like, that looks exactly like this other thing that happens later a lot, which I think is really cool. It's probably my favorite sequence in the movie, so it might be why I focused on it too.
Possibly.
The other thing that's so awesome and weird at the same time about Sucker Punch and Zack Snyder in general is his choice of music for films. Yes.
And he is very specific when it comes to music. Not only, he doesn't typically will play, he usually uses a cover of a song. Like he'll have someone do a cover of a famous song. He does have like actual songs used throughout his films as well. But this one is especially interesting to me because Emily Browning, who plays Baby Doll, actually sings on 3 of the songs that are played in the movie. Okay. Yes, so she sings Sweet Dreams at the beginning of the film during Baby Doll's backstory.
Yeah, which is a song all about, I mean, that's part of how he contributes to you understanding her situation, because it's songs all about Somebody wants to abuse you. Sometimes they want to be abused. All that stuff. You're like, this is about abuse. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, I understand it. Yeah, he uses music not just to fill in like the background or to help convey the emotion, which it still does, but he uses the actual songs and the lyrics of the songs to help move the story and tell. They're just another proponent of the story. It's almost like when you read a book and you have all the tiny little details to give you the full picture. Snyder does that through song lyrics that are playing during the course of a scene, which I think is really, it's so cool. He gets a ton of credit for his opening sequences being just like the most epic thing you'll ever watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
His montages are amazing. But I think a lot of that comes from his background in directing music videos, which is where his actual filmmaking career started off, was making music videos. But yeah, so she sings Sweet Dreams at the beginning. She does a guest spot on the cover of Where Is My Mind. She actually sings the Where Is My Mind part of the song.
Interesting.
Which is fun. If the song sounds kind of familiar to the wider audience, that is the same song used at the very end of Fight Club, but this is a cover of that version. Yeah. So it's really cool to hear the two very contrasting versions of the song. I really like this version. I like the other one more.
Sure.
But I think it's very interesting that she sings that part and that song is used right at the beginning. Well, during the whole Lennox house opening, because it's kind of super important because you see the doctor and the tools, and that's where the movie cuts.
Right. Yeah. The whole lead up, like when she gets to the place, there's a very important conversation in the theater with Dr. Gursky and all that stuff. But after she's established in this place, there's a montage of time that passes. You don't know how fast. And then all of a sudden she's in the chair about to get a lobotomy. And you're like, oh, well, that's the whole story, basically.
Yeah, you're like, oh, shit, she's been here 5 days already.
Yeah. And then it goes into the other world. So that whole sequence is very interesting and important.
Yeah. First time I watched that movie, I did not, for some reason, it just did not connect that first time I saw it of oh, she's already experienced everything. This is just her mind. And it's one of my favorite things about the movie. More times I've watched it, especially that second time I saw it. Because it came out in, I don't know the date that this one came out.
2011, I think.
Oh, I was going to say earlier than that. 2011?
Yeah, 2011, for sure.
Okay. So yeah, wow, this movie's 11 years old. Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I saw it when it first came out, and then obviously I watch it pretty often. But that first time, it just for some reason in my brain, and I think he did this very masterful, where he shows you, hey, it's been 5 days.
Yeah.
Fantasy world. You don't even understand that first time that you watched it, oh, yeah, she's already being lobotomized.
Yeah. All you really have is a line of dialogue from the orderly that says the doctor's coming in 5 days and he's the one who can give her a lobotomy. And then it goes through that sequence and the guy's there and you're like, oh, okay. And then it goes into the whole rest of the movie. I don't think it's till the very end when she gets the lobotomy, she's walking back through the whole building, and you see all of the things that connect you to the club world, the fantasy world in her mind, actually happened. Like the chef's missing his knife, and like you said, the Blue has the cut in his neck or a bandage cut on his neck, and so you're like, oh, that happened. Everything we saw in that world did happen.
The closet is burned down. They're boarding it up.
Yeah.
They mention, hey, an inmate escaped, and you're like, it's crazy to me because thinking back on it, you're like, okay, so if these key things actually happened, that means that the death scenes that we see in the movie
Right.
Probably didn't take place exactly how you see it in the movie, but that means that did they actually happen?
It means Amber is dead, Blondie is dead. Yes.
I also like
in like the third level deep, Rocket dies.
Right.
And you're like, okay, so yeah, all of those people.
Well,
except for
so I
Sweet
went
Blondie.
back even further. I tried to dive deeper into it and was like, okay, do the other girls even exist? Or was it just Sweet Pea?
Yeah. That is a very good question. It's hard to say because the only ones that seem grounded in reality are Baby Doll and Sweet Pea.
Yeah, because Sweet Pea's the one that's on the stage in the theater when she gets brought in and being introduced.
Yeah.
Sweet Pea's up on the theater.
Yeah. And there's even there's even an interesting connection between Sweet Pea and Baby Doll because after they cut where she's about to be lobotomized, they cut, and the very next scene is Sweet Pea standing up, who's dressed like Baby Doll,
right,
getting out of a lobotomy chair, and in the theater they're basically doing that scene, and so you're like, was it real? Was it not real? Is it a play? Is it not a play? And does Baby Doll exist, or is it Sweet Pea like combined? It's a little confusing at first. I do think it's generally exactly what you see is my takeaway.
So it's fine. So on the Blu-ray extended cut, I think they have it on the theatrical as well. But once you watch an actual Snyder cut of something, I mean, do you ever watch the cut version? No.
Why would you do that?
But, he has it like they do this in movie making of. So you watch the whole movie and he cuts in during the course of the movie and breaks down scenes, storytelling, tools they did. And so the third time I watched it this week, I watched it in that mode.
Okay.
Hoping for, all right, Snyder, you got to give us like some form of answer of what is real, who is real.
Yeah.
And you got to tell me if the ending is real, because the ending is also up for debate for a lot of audiences. We'll get to that, obviously, because I'm curious to hear your take on the ending, and I'm sure we'll end up sharing probably the same take, but guess what? Snyder does not give you a definitive answer. He actually jokes about towards the end of the movie on his like making of, where he goes, we wanted people to kind of debate what was real and what happened, what didn't happen. And I'm like, damn it.
That's a genius move on his part. Don't ruin it. That's the best way.
But I would say after you've seen Sucker Punch, you should go back and try to watch it in this mode where he breaks it down, because it's really interesting how he does it. It's really fun because he'll even break down like why certain people got cast, kind of the way they were going with a certain scene. They'll even put in like the actual storyboards during the course of the film, so you can see like, oh, cool. And if you are a filmmaker or aspiring filmmaker, I thought this was a cool thing. I know this feature is also done on a handful of other movies. I kind of want to go and watch some of those as well. Because to me, seeing those storyboards that they show actually kind of like gave me a little bit of peace, because I know when you try to draw storyboards, sometimes people can get caught up in trying to be overly detailed with it and all this. The storyboards for this are some of the most simple, just quick, like sketches. And that was kind of comforting to me of like, okay, you don't have to get caught up in trying to make it look perfect as a filmmaker or aspiring filmmaker or whatever. So watch it. It's really cool because they give you like break down how to set up the sets. And this is a 100% green screen film, which is crazy. But
a lot like 300.
Anyways, it was a cool mode.
That is a cool mode. I should check that out. One of the, speaking of, did it happen that way or is it real or is it not? One of the things I wanted to ask you about happens at the very beginning after the dad or stepdad takes her to the Lennox house. He fills out her like entrance form and it says he's like female 20.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he lied about her age, or is she actually this tiniest 20-year-old you've ever seen in your life?
Okay. I actually think that she is possibly older than 20.
Okay.
And I'm not super well versed, so if anyone else is actually versed in this, you can chime in, tell me I'm like completely off base. But I kind of feel like he does lie about the age, but he makes her younger than what she actually is, so that he can incarcerate her in this place.
Mm-hmm.
Even though 18 is technically a minor. But this is also like some other world that you don't have any clue what time this movie takes place.
Yeah, you're like, this might be the 50s, maybe?
Like, there's aspects and some things that could be the 50s, but then there's also aspects that are not the 50s.
It's also like
the
2011.
80s or 2011. And Snyder did that on purpose because he wanted to make a timeless movie.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate making a timeless film because that means you don't get hung up on a date.
Right.
Which helps. And that's a subject that we're going to dive into next week, but little hint.
That's a very good hint, actually.
So part of me actually wonders if Baby Doll is actually older, but he's lying to make her younger so that his choice of putting her in this mental institution is like, oh, she's not an adult yet, or at least 21-year-old, if you will.
That could be.
Or he is straight up lying so that he's not like completely, oh, you are just as gross as we all thought. She could be like 18.
I was thinking more of the other direction where she could be 16 or 17 and he knew that they were going to put her into this sort of sexually abusive scenario and didn't want them to reject her or not take her because she's too young or not legal or whatever. Like, they knew that they were bad, but you're not. A lot of people aren't that bad, you know.
As I say all that out loud, it all made super sense in my head. But when I said it out loud, I'm like, no, she's like 16, 17. He's lying so that he doesn't come across quite as gross. But then he still comes across gross because the orderly Oscar Isaac is like, whatever you did to her, Dad, I don't care. We're going to take care of it. And you're like, ew.
Yeah. We're just going to make her forget all about it with this lobotomy.
Yeah. So I actually retract my original thought and I side with yours.
Okay, cool. I like being right. That works for me. So they take her into this theater room. They call it the theater. Dr. Gorski is there. Essentially, she's the therapist of the whole hospital, essentially, but she's also seems to be teaching these girls or using how does Blue or Oscar Isaac's character, I don't know if his name's Blue in the real world, but he describes her using this like Polish therapy in the theater to help them deal with their issues and essentially through putting on a show in this theater room, which is, I think, partially referring to the rest of the movie that happens to be an illusion or a fantasy.
I do agree with you. I think it's an interesting thing that they call it the theater, because when he says that, I take that more of kind of him being like cheeky about it. Just kind of being like, this is where we put all of these crazy people as he views them, or all these crazy women as he views them, into this room, and it's a show for these horrible orderlies. But then you see on stage, because on the floor there's a big fight, but on the stage you can see the doctor using the stage as kind of her therapy session, where she's like trying to get she's trying to get the women to kind of reenact to be able to process through the stuff that they went through. And I actually think that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't agree with that method. I think that's kind of a dangerous method, especially if you're trying to help people work through trauma. But I like that little thing about that doctor, because I think that feeds into the fantasy version of her, where she means well, but her execution is just not right.
Yeah, that's a good point too, where she is on the girl's side trying to help them, but not doing a good job of it overall.
Right.
And also the play nature of it, the theatrical nature of the therapy plays into the theatrical nature of the movie and the fantasy that she plays out in her mind. You see that very first interaction. So the Dr. Gorski character is probably one of the most important characters in the movie, because every line she has plays two different ways. It plays in the exact scene that it's in, but also refers to something else at the same time. And so that first scene when she's talking to that other girl on the stage, Baby Doll sees it and Liz listening and kind of absorbing immediately. And she's directing that girl to, she says, what you're imagining right now, that world you control, that place can be as real as any
right.
pain. And so that living in an imaginary world and using it plays in deeply into the rest of the movie. That's like the very first hint.
It kind of really helps it's a part of setting the whole stage for the rest of the story. Every time they walk into that room and the orderly is like, we call this the theater. Every time I'm like, oh, that's so cringy. Like, I can just imagine. And then as you see the fantasy world play out, considering everything that happens in Baby Doll's fantasy is directly correlated somehow, whether it's a small detail or whatever, or just the atmosphere, to the real world, to reality in the Lennox house. Yeah. It kind of makes the whole brothel thing even more gross, especially hearing him call it the theater, because they're putting the women on display and you're like, for other orderlies or for other disgusting men who are paying the orderly off to have their way with these mentally unhealthy women. It's just like, there's so many layers to it where you're like, this gets gross.
Yeah.
But you find yourself rooting so much more for the women to like, all right, we got to get out of here.
Right, exactly. And if you know anything about history and especially early on mental institutions, abuse was rampant, like constantly, especially for mental institutions where people aren't all there entirely, whether they've been lobotomized or shock therapy or what have you. And so this is just a great representation. It's disgusting, but it's a great representation of that. And yeah, you think the orderly is taking $2,000, a tiny amount of money on the grand scale of, he's taking $2,000 to have this girl lobotomized against her will and against the will of the doctor, who is essentially in her care. And so what else will you let people do for an even smaller amount of money to these poor girls? It's terrifying. So yeah, that's a very good point, I think. Yeah. So after we talked about it already a little bit, there's like a montage of her 5 days there. She ends up in the lobotomy chair, and right before she's getting lobotomized, you see the spike like right in front of her face. Right before she gets lobotomized, there's like a cut, and you hear stop, and then that's where that scene I mentioned where she sits up out of the chair, but it's not Baby Doll. It's Sweet Pea dressed like Baby Doll, and she was getting a lobotomy on stage in the theater, and it kind of switches. Like, something is different about this world now. You don't really know it immediately. But
you catch up, well, because it, like, the camera follows Sweet Pea up out of the chair. You see the other girls dressed up as who will be the high roller, and then the two nurses.
Yeah.
And then you see the doctor, who's dressed pretty fancy. Like, like everything's suddenly like
Dr. Schwez.
It's suddenly a very vibrant environment, and you get that because the camera slowly shows you more. Like, the shots becomes just subtly wider as this whole quick open, into the fantasy world comes up. And that's when you really understand, like, oh, we aren't just in like the mental institution. We are officially in like some kind of other world. Where am I? Because the marketing for the film was horrible. The trailers all showed this to be some crazy action movie of these like 4 women being given missions to go on.
Yeah.
That's not what the movie is at all.
No, not at all. It's like, and I think that's a great point, especially for this scene, because as Sweet Pea stops the scene and talks to the doctor or director or the now madam of this club, and she's like, this doesn't really make sense. I don't understand the point of this play or scene or whatever it is we're doing. Because what we do should be to turn people on. And she gets the sexy schoolgirl stuff, and she even gets the helpless mental patient stuff. But she doesn't understand why lobotomized vegetables would be sexy.
Right.
And she even says, how about something more commercial, for God's sake? And I feel like that's Zack Snyder talking through the screen of like people, the audience and the critics and the studios and everybody is like saying that. They're like,
yeah,
this is supposed to be a movie about sexy chicks going on missions. And
it's not.
This is not commercial at all. And it's not what I expected. And that is, I think that's him saying, yes, I know what you think it is. I know what you want it to be. But it's something bigger than that, is what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, which I feel like he's been trying to get audiences, at least en masse, to understand for like the last 17 years.
Right. Yeah, so you realize that they're in a different world. Things look, the same people are there. They're all playing the same roles, essentially. But now Oscar Isaac's character is named Blue. He is not an orderly. He's the owner of this club or brothel or whatever it is. There's drugs and gambling, and very obviously that these girls are prostitutes or being prostituted out. Not that they chose a career in it exactly. And so they have, Blue has brought Baby Doll in as a special treat for the high roller who comes in 5 days. He is the same doctor who will be the lobotomizer in 5 days. So that mirror is there. And so the high roller's coming in 5 days to deflower her, which is disgusting, but whatever. And
very gross.
And so she is essentially, she's just hanging out basically for 5 days until that happens. She can't be like, she's not any like all the rest of the girls who are just, normal career women in the brothel. I don't know what I'm trying to say. So,
she's like the only. So she is Baby Doll's the virgin of the whole brothel now,
right? And
that's why she's being held for the high roller, so that he's the one that gets to take her. But his whole speech, his speech is so interesting. I'm
right. I'm excited to get to that.
but that's to come. But yeah, he has a very odd speech for being the kind of character he is.
Yeah. And Blue talks several times in the movie about how Baby Doll was brought in to make him a ton of money because the high roller will pay an exorbitant amount of money for that experience. In reality, you're getting $2,000. It's not like a ton of money. It's kind of funny to me.
Depending on what time period this movie takes place,
true.
That could be a ton of money, but
it's true.
We will never know.
It's not happening in 2022. I'll tell you that right now. Inflation. Okay, so Oscar Isaac. The funniest part of this movie to me, which it's probably the part I like the least, but I tolerate it because it's entertaining at minimum, is the big musical dance number that Oscar Isaac and everybody has. It's kind of a montage of, this is what life is like in this club. Baby Doll is kind of a stagehand. She's not performing or anything, but they have their first night at the club, and she is observing this huge song that Oscar Isaac sings. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, so the song is Love is a Drug.
Yeah.
Or The Drug is Love. I don't
Both.
know. It's both.
It's very Moulin Rouge-y, which is out of place I like Moulin Rouge, but it's kind of out of place in a Zack Snyder movie.
See, I kind of, like, the first time I saw it, I was a little like, well, this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how I feel about this one. But then I watched it a couple more times, right? And now I'm like, no, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
One, Snyder even said in the making of version of the film, where he's like, this is kind of a fun callback for me to like the music video days. He got to help work with choreography and all this, but he wanted to show the girls, even if it was for a split second, all their different dances.
Yeah.
And kind of like
their different costumes or themes.
Their costuming and like kind of their, how do you word it?
It's like an introduction to them.
They're kind of like, you're getting a glimpse to their personalities through this dance sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like, by the time I got it and kind of understood it, I'm okay with the montage. The only part of it that I don't care for is the very, 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 very end of it, where she's holding the mic with the heel of her shoe.
Yeah.
And she whispers it. There's just something about that every time I watch it, I'm like,
Yeah.
I think it would have been better if the lights just like cut out when she kicks him away, but that's just me. And that's such a minute thing, but I kind of get it. I feel like I get that whole montage, just as the theatricality of this fantasy world or this brothel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a decent introduction to the outer persona that the Doctor and Blue are putting on for their audiences, and even for the girls. Yeah, when behind the scenes, behind that curtain, they're actually not good people. At all.
and also for the clientele, because it kind of partly follows one guy who is gambling and gets kicked out and roughed up and pulls a gun and all that stuff. So it's a dangerous, seedy place, you know?
Yeah.
So you get the feeling.
I'm all right with the musical number, but that first time you watch it, it does feel just so out of place and random. It really, I agree with you on that. It really,
And there's something about like the very next scene when they're all going to bed and Baby Doll's crying like in the bathroom. The song that plays during that, it sounds like it's like I don't know if it's a cappella or something. It sounds like somebody's singing it, and I'm like, is this a musical? Well, I think when I first saw it, I was like, is this a musical?
Well, it's funny that you thought it was someone saying that is the second song or third song that Emily Browning sings. That is Baby Doll singing that song, which to me adds a layer of like emotion, kind of a very deep hit, because that song is tragic.
Yeah.
The lyrics are like asking for someone to help give this woman peace and to like help her sleep, get away from this. And then it focuses on Baby Doll just breaking down in the bathroom.
And there's not really any dialogue or conversation. I mean, Rocket checks on her, but there's no actual it's the focus is the song, really.
Which I thought of interesting little note. Emily Browning, although being the title actress and character in Sucker Punch, she doesn't have a word of dialogue for 18 minutes into the film.
Yeah. There's very long stretches, especially at the beginning, where there's narration, but she doesn't say anything. She does a lot, but she doesn't say anything.
I really I didn't take that song as like, oh, is this a musical? I took that as like, oh, this feels extra tragic. And then when I found out that the actress is actually the one singing the song during that scene, I was like, oh, yeah. Yep, it feels real tragic now. Oh my God.
It lands for sure. So I think shortly after that, you have Rocket, who is Jenna Malone's character, who's working in the kitchen and tries to steal like a snack or something, and gets confronted by this chef who's a giant dude, and
he's a giant guy who tries to take advantage of her.
Yeah, assaults her, like pins her down. He's so much heavier than her, so she can't get away. And then Baby Doll, who's scrubbing the floor, hears something and comes in and saves Rocket. She's essentially her guardian angel, calling back to the beginning of the movie. And so saves her from the chef. They get away and go to a dance class. And the dance class is kind of the first big thing that happens, but that's like an actual action sequence.
Yeah. Because Baby Doll is given a piece of music again to dance to, and everyone's kind of congregating. Blue and his goons, are all congregating. She's kind of nervous, doesn't do it, and then they like restart the song for her, and that's when you dive into the third layer of fantasy, or the second layer of fantasy, but the third level of the story.
Right.
And this is like some one flew over the Inception into the Matrix or something like that. I think they need to add some layers to that title.
There's not enough layers, yes. But right before that, when she first gives her the music, she doesn't dance. As the doctor stops the music and gives her another extremely poignant like direction or narration, essentially, where she gives her the phrase that is also used again at the end of the film, and she describes that where is it? So she says that your fight for survival starts now.
Yep.
And if you don't want to be judged, you won't be. You don't think you're strong enough, you are. You're afraid, don't be. You have all the weapons you need. Now fight. And then she puts on the music, and then she starts dancing. Like her dancing is like, she just slowly sways.
Well, yeah, she's like swaying just kind of to the rhythm of the song, and she's then like, it does that
building up, like it's like a car like about to start.
Yeah,
and before
and then the camera like zooms close to her eye. You see a like snowflake fall, and that's you're like, oh, we're going somewhere else now.
Yeah,
and then it does that like full 360 into the samurai temple.
Yeah. And so you're in this samurai temple dojo place, and in the snow, and it's very cool and stylized. And so she walks in and sees this man. I didn't know his name. They never really say his name.
No, he's just the wise man.
Yeah, apparently he's the wise man. I called him like the master or something like that.
That's fair.
But I meant to write down who that actor is. I love that actor. He is awesome in everything.
Oh my God, I lost
Give
his
me
name.
2
It's
seconds.
Sam something.
Yes, it is.
And we were doing so well with like our notes are on point. We were doing. It's not even saying it's Scott Glenn. We're dumb.
I love Scott Glenn though, and he's great as this wise man who essentially is guiding her. You don't know where he came from, but he knows her. Like he obviously is wise. He knows what's up. He knows where she's going. He knows where she needs to go, and tries to give her direction. And so he tells her that, she says she needs a way out of here. And he says, yeah, obviously. And so he says that you can do that if you get these, like, he says, these are your weapons. He shows her weapons, and it's a sword and a gun, which is obvious, but analogous to her weapons in the real world, which we talked about a little bit. And then he tells her that in order to escape, she needs to find 5 things, and then tells her that she needs to find a map and a knife and a fire and a key. And then the 5th one's a mystery,
right?
Which is always exciting.
But it'll come, like, he basically tells her you have to get these 5 items. The 5th one, you have to find out yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you what that one is. But he says it comes with, like, a sacrifice and one other thing.
He gives her a very, like, vague description, which could mean anything, but he says...
Right. But it's essentially like, there's a price.
Yeah. He says, it's the reason, it's the goal, it'll be a deep sacrifice and a perfect victory. And you're like, oh, that's what
it is, a perfect victory. Yeah.
Yeah. And it says only you can find it, and if you do, it'll set you free. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that sounds good. And then he does the thing he always does, which he will do many times to come. He says,
which is one of my favorite things.
he turns into Columbo, and he's like, oh, one more thing, defend yourself. And then she looks outside, and there's these 3 giant golem things,
Massive fucking they're samurai, but they are massive. They're 10-foot tall samurai with different weapons.
Yeah. And they're like, you don't know if they're like stone or mechanical or what are, like, you don't really know what they are. You just know they're big and scary and they're going to kill her.
Yep.
So,
and you never find out what they actually are made of because they don't bleed like normal things.
Right. And that's an interesting thing as well. So every time that she goes into this dance vision world, she fights a different kind of enemy, monster, whatever it is, and it always it is something different, and it always reacts differently. Where in this first one, it is when she cuts it with the sword, there's like a bright light that comes out, or when she shoots it in the face, like light comes out, and then later it's different things, and different things come out, but it's never blood, which is interesting.
Yep.
So she fights them. It's badass. I don't really have any other thing to say about it.
It is so badass. It's cool as shit.
And not only are these things like, they're like 10 feet tall. So like, and she's short as crap. She's not even like, she might be 5 foot, maybe like 4'10".
She might, I'll give her a little more credit. I'm going to say she's like 5'2", 5'3".
She's like Hayden Panettiere small. She's tiny. And so it's like 3 or 4 times as tall as she is. And the first one has like a giant fuck off sword that's like the biggest sword you've ever seen, and then the second one has like a bazooka and a minigun, and it's like, oh, you're not just like samurai with like spears and swords, you've got like guns and stuff.
Right, you're like the modern age samurai guy.
Yeah.
And then the third one is kind of more of the traditional samurai. They've got like the giant katana that she fights with. Fun little detail about the sword that I learned.
Okay.
So the sword looks cool.
Yeah.
Because they always look cool. But it's got like very specific carvings in it that they only ever focus on one time in the movie, and that's during the second battle, or the second battle, because that's the fire battle, right? Or is that the third? The third.
Yeah. The second one to get an item is the fire battle, but it's the third in the movie.
Yeah.
The first one doesn't really count.
So the carvings on the sword are actually the story of the movie. They are from start to finish Baby Doll's journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is cool.
I thought that was kind of a neat thing. And like Snyder talks about, they were so excited to have all like the story completely carved into the blade, and then they were like, but shit, we can't show too much of the carvings or the blade then.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a double-edged sword, you could say.
Right. But I thought that was a fun detail.
Yeah,
because then when they do show the focus part of the blade, and you see like the dragon carved in it, I found myself like, oh, how much more are they going to show? Like, I want to see like.
Yeah, that's a fun detail. That'd be an awesome prop to have, actually.
Yeah, another one of those movie props that you and I would be like, see that? That's fucking yeah.
Yeah. So when she finishes fighting, she finishes dancing. Like the fight in the fantasy is the dance. That's like the main takeaway. Whenever you see her in a battle, that's her dancing.
Right.
Because her dancing and her sexuality are her weapons, and she's using her weapons to fight or to escape or whatever. And so you see it's that's like I guess the complicated part where the worlds are connected. But once you realize that, I think it's smooth sailing, and the whole movie is cool in that regard.
Yeah.
And so it's funny though, because as soon as she gets out of that, everybody's impressed. Like everybody liked it. Blue liked it. All like his minions liked it. The girls are like, oh, that was really good, especially for first time and all that stuff. And then they like, I think it's Sweet Pea like critiques her. She's like, there could be less moaning and gyration and stuff. And you're like, that's kind of like, it's a weird dialogue, but I think it makes perfect sense that you, even though you didn't see the dance, you get the gist. You understand that, oh, she had a super sexy dance that did accomplish the goal. She fought well in that regard, you know? So I think it's interesting.
I also kind of take that as like another one of like maybe a potential little jab, like you said with Snyder's comment of, hey, why don't we just do something more commercial? Yeah, that could be a jab to like, we probably could have done without so much excessive violence in that part. Almost, you know, a giant samurai with a fucking Gatling gun, like the machine gun that just never stops firing. Which Snyder jokes about having that in the movie. So you could take that line as another little like fun. They wanted something super commercial, so we'll like
yeah, I like that even more. That's awesome.
Now who knows? Because Snyder never confirms any of that, but I like that you and I take that.
You know, he does those kinds of double meanings and does one thing and it's referring to something else, which is a lot of this movie, which is cool.
Yeah.
So Baby Doll tells all of the other girls that she's going to escape. And they agree, like they are on board for the most part.
Yeah, Sweet Pea's a little like... Oh.
She's the most hesitant and she's trying to like maintain control. She's like, if at any point I'm uncomfortable or it doesn't work out or things start going bad, I get to say we're done and that means we're done. And everybody's like, yeah, sure, totally. Yeah, we'll do that.
You got it, dude.
Yeah. And so they all agree to team up. And so Sweet Pea tells them, and she writes on the chalkboard all of the items that the guy told her that they need to get. And they instantly identify, oh, we know where the map is. We know who has a lighter. We know who has a knife and all that stuff. So the plan is set. And they also, Baby Doll knows immediately that, oh, when I danced, we went to this thing. So all we need to do is get people to watch me dance. And then they won't notice when you get the things that we're talking about. So that's the plan. Just get her in front of them, let her dance, and steal the stuff. Yeah,
she's like, my mission is to be the distraction. That's my purpose. Mm-hmm. While I distract them, you guys can go off and collect the items. Yeah. Which Sweet Pea is like, so we're gonna do all the work? Like, yep, yeah, you are.
Yeah, basically. You don't have super dance powers like Baby Doll, so you got to.
Right.
And so the map is the first thing. They know that there's that big map on the wall in Blue's office. And so Sweet Pea goes and tells him that, oh, Baby Doll's dancing again. And he's like, oh boy, let's go watch. And it's always funny. When he leaves the office, he closes the door, like right in front of her face, but he doesn't lock it. He just like leaves.
No, yeah.
And then she just opens it again. She's like, I'm just going inside. It always makes me laugh. Because he's like trying to be private, but also not that private.
Well, I also kind of take it as him overthinking his power.
Yeah.
Or like, because he figures, she knows she's not allowed in here. She wouldn't do anything to betray me, like go in there.
Yeah.
And then she does.
Yeah. He has a little hubris in there.
Yeah.
And so all of this time when she starts dancing, she goes into another vision the same way, but all of the other girls are in this vision as well. And the wise, what did you call him? A wise guy?
He's the wise man. He's the wise man.
Just the one wise man.
He's not a gangster.
Just the one wise man, not the three wise men, just one of them. He's there and he's like a captain or some squad leader who's like, hey girls, here's the plan. We need to go. And you're up against these like Germans. It's like World War I. There's biplanes and stuff. And there's like you need to go in and get the map. Like in this dance vision, they have the same goal, which is this map that this German commander has. And so the Amber, who is the Asian girl. She is the pilot, and she's a pilot in pretty much all of them. And but she flies this cool like mech that is like a walking mech that then has like jets and flies up in the sky. And that's really cool. I like that a lot. But the other thing that the wise man says is that the Germans have figured out how to like reanimate their dead or their fallen soldiers and stuff. And so their engineers and stuff have used steam power and clockwork parts, and they're essentially like steampunk guys, not real. And he says like they're already dead, so don't worry about killing them. And so this is the part that we alluded to at the very beginning, where every time that somebody shoots them or cuts them with a sword or whatever, steam shoots out of their body. Exactly like
it's exactly like the steam flying out of the pipe. Yeah.
When she shoots her sister, and so has to be related.
It's one of those little details that you would assume would bleed into Baby Doll's fantasy world from the real world, because that's such a significant part to her trauma when she lost her sister. So yeah, 100%. I'm right there with you. That was one of those details, especially like diving into it this last week, being like, they're not just steampunk soldiers. Like, I feel they represent bad things, and the steam is a part of a very bad thing for her. So. Right.
It's embedded in her memory as she's working through this trauma in a way, kind of.
Yeah, it's like the subconscious bleeding into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I love the whole aesthetic of that battle being in like the World War I mixed with some World War II kind of battleground. It's so cool. And again, it works with the timelessness of the film. You don't know which war they're actually talking about or in. There's some blimps.
There's blimps. There's biplanes. That makes me think it's World War I, but being Germans, it could be any time. And you never know. It's certainly my favorite action sequence is this whole part. Everything in the trenches, everything in the... And they're using modern guns. Like the girls have modern guns from like the 90s and 2000s. So yeah, it's weirdly timeless in a cool way, I think.
Yeah, that whole battle sequence during her second dance sequence, which starts off the first of the
and the other thing, cool. The other thing that the wise man says is he sometimes he gives them very specific directions, and sometimes he gives them very ambiguous like advice. And so he tells them, remember, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Pretty standard. Everybody's heard that phrase. And then, but that being the first mission of theirs together, he also says, and one last thing, try to work together. And so that's important, obviously, as they're forming this unit.
It's like one of those pieces of advice where you as a normal person would hear it and be like, well, no shit, we get it. But then if you don't put that piece of advice to action, you're like, shit, we're going to this isn't going to work at all. Right. And so I like that the girls who already kind of feel like they have a good sense of like camaraderie, they will work well together. I like that they immediately use each other's strengths and are able to be there for each other. Yeah. It enhances the fight scenes. That's for sure.
They all save each other a couple of times, and they do a good job of working together.
But it is a fun little piece because you realize like the stakes of if they don't work together could be very disastrous because you don't quite know how far like Blue is willing to go to maintain his control on the women.
Right.
You don't know that. So you understand, stakes are pretty high. And they're trying to do, they're breaking into his office to steal the map. Right now. Like Sweet Pea is in his office.
Yeah. And when they get out, when he goes to his office, he is so observant that he pretty much notices immediately something's off.
Well, he's so OCD. Like, I think that's a cool thing. You really get a sense of, Yeah, because when he returns to his office, the first thing he does is he scopes it out.
Yeah.
Almost like not out of suspicion, but it's like confirmation that he left everything exactly how he wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that his OCD is so high that he notices a second thumbnail hole in the corner of the map.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the thing that the girls don't anticipate is that Blue is so impressed by Baby Doll's dancing that he wants her to do a private dance, a special dance for the mayor, which is you don't anticipate because you think that he's saving her for the high roller that's coming. But he, he clarifies like just dancing. She's a good dancer and no like touchy feely stuff going on. And so that means that's when the girls have that conversation about we need to get the lighter from the mayor because he always has a cigar and they talk about how they're going to do that. But there's Dr. Gorski has another line here, which is, it's a Mark Twain quote, but she uses it and it applies throughout the movie where she says, "Don't part from your illusions. When they're gone, you may still exist, but you will cease to live." And it's a lot of Baby Doll is using these illusions as her whether it's an alternate, like an escape from reality kind of thing, or it's just a visualization of her using her weapons or whatever. And so everything that she says, I'm like, it just applies throughout the movie, and or either it's foreshadowing what's happening in the real world, or it's applying to the exact situation they're in.
Yeah, and I also take that line as calling back to the actual reality in the film, because it's almost like a very blatant way to remind the viewer, like, we're in a fantasy world right now, even when she's not going farther into fantasy during the fight sequences. You are like in her fantasy because there's no life flashing before her eyes. This is her form of survival. Right. Like, this is the last stretch for her mind to do something, create this persona or whatever it is that she's doing, which I actually really like. So I take that line from the doctor as kind of a callback, a blatant reminder of like, this is all fantasy.
Yeah. This is all fantasy, but this illusion is as real as reality. It is your life. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we're on the lighter.
Yeah. We are on
We're on track. We're on track, folks.
And so the mission to get the lighter is the one where they start out in the plane and they jump down they're in like a it's like a medieval courtyard, and the monsters in this one are orcs, basically.
Yeah.
And they need to fight these orcs. And the wise man tells them they need to find this dragon and cut open his throat, and inside you'll find 2 crystals that you smash together to get fire, and it's a lighter, basically. And and so he also tells them, don't write checks with your mouth that you can't cash with your ass. Very important advice. And don't wake the mother is the last piece of advice. But you don't know what that means at the time, because he doesn't specifically say it's a baby dragon, but you piece together before the end of the adventure that it is a baby dragon and there is a mother dragon that you don't want to wake.
But if you saw the preview, you saw the dragon.
That's true.
The dragon has a quick blip in that trailer. You should go back and watch the trailer, folks. You'll laugh, especially after you watch the movie where you go, wow, they did not market the film well.
Yeah. Yeah. It is all of the cool action parts. But
so there's it's one of my favorite details of this movie, actually. Okay. So when they battle the orcs, it's pretty cool watching orcs get shot up because
fuck orcs.
How
often do you see orcs like get mowed down with machine guns. Like that never happens.
It's pretty cool to watch, and they look pretty gross and evil. It's pretty cool. But when they get into the tower with the dragon, Baby doll comes up to it and like holds up its head and slits its throat because that's what she was told to do. Fun little detail. So the lighter that they're trying to get has a dragon carving on it.
Right.
Where it opens is the dragon's throat. And where she cuts the dragon is actually right where the lighter actually opens. I thought, like, what a great little... That's a well thought out detail. That's a fun detail. Especially since that's where the two elements that they clash together to make the fire come from. You're like, that'd be the filament and the fluid.
Yeah,
like,
that's literally a lighter. Yeah.
It's literally a lighter. It's a fun little detail. Man, how do people not like this?
It's cool. I like
cool.
it. So I don't know if you have anything more to say about the Oscar or the orc fight. The action is like, the action is awesome. It's so fun to watch, but there's not a lot to talk about. I mean, it's awesome action.
It is awesome action. The dragon, the mother dragon, obviously shows up, and she looks badass. Fun. There is a fun tidbit that I learned on this, and Jake, I think you will get a big kick out of this. Actually, so it's two fun tidbits for you, one of which you'll laugh at that I meant to say earlier, but I'll say it now.
All right.
Okay. So Vanessa Hudgens, who most audiences would have known her from like the High School Musical movie. I never saw them. I don't know how many there are.
There's 3 movies. I don't know if she's in all of them.
Oh, well, she's from at least one of them. So she's in this, and she gets to fire a 50 cal in the movie. That was a real 50 cal that she's firing.
Okay. That is awesome.
So they talk about it in the making of like, she was so stoked to get to actually fire this thing. Snyder thought it was kind of funny for her because she's also pretty petite to be firing this giant 50 cal mounted on the side of a helicopter on a sound stage. So it was like, everyone's like double ear muffed up and everything. And here's Vanessa Hudgens just firing this gun. Obviously she's not firing live rounds, but because they use blanks and stuff,
right?
But that's a 50 cal that she's firing. I thought that was a fun little thing because in such a heavily CGI green screen film, you would almost assume like it's a prop 50 cal that they would just add everything into post. Nope.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't hear that, but I heard Jamie Chung, who plays Amber.
Yeah.
She talked about how they've trained so long for all of this stuff for months, and they've shot so much of other scenes that didn't make it into the movie that all of the scenes, especially the action ones, could be 10 minutes longer. Yeah. Because they had so much more action, and they had all shot so many guns and all
like
stuff.
They did go through extensive weapons training, and the funny part about that, so that actors always do all that kind of training, whether it's stunt coordination, weapons training, all this stuff, well in advance of actually shooting the film.
Yeah.
So Emily Browning, who's Baby Doll, when it came time to film the backstory sequence, Snyder told her, like, hey, you have to, like, kind of forget all of your training. And he laughs about, it was like the one direction she couldn't do. It was like pointing out in the backstory part, like, look how she's holding this weapon. Like, she was trained to hold that weapon this way. She's firing that gun this way because that's how she was trained. She couldn't do it. She could not unlearn how to handle a gun.
At this point in the story, you've never held one before.
Right, but she's holding it like she's done it before. So I like that the director is pointing out, like, talented actress can't unlearn holding a gun.
Yeah.
And those are my 2 tidbits for you, Jake. I thought you would get a kick out of those.
Yeah,
and maybe be a little jealous of Vanessa Hudgens for firing off that 50 cal.
I am. I have never done that, and it sounds awesome. So after that, they get the lighter, and that's kind of the first major confrontation that is terrifying. That Blue comes to their dressing room. He confronts them because the mayor says he can't find his lighter. I noticed somebody was in my office. You guys are up to something. I'm in control. It needs to stop all of that stuff. And that scene especially stands out as like, oh shit, he's not just a dork in charge who on a power trip. Like, he's actually terrifying and keeping all of these women, including Dr. Gorski or whatever she's, Madame Gorski, in line through his control tactics. And the way he threatens Baby Doll, especially, saying that it's so gross but so clever when he's like, if I wasn't making a small fortune off of you, I would take you right here and pop that smile off your face. I was like, oh my God, that's
Oscar
it makes you
Isaac.
Go, that's gross.
Yeah, he deserves a lot of recognition. I think this is such a great villain, and I feel kind of like a shitty movie fan for not keeping him in mind of like of a great villain. You don't see him on any list or anything, and I'm watching this movie and I'm like, we have all failed him. He is fantastic because he's so fucking gross.
Yeah, I think we forget about him because he made a great turn. That's a wrestling reference for those who don't know. Where he started out as the heel in all of these in movies. He was the villain he was Prince John in Robin Hood. He was in this movie, so he started out playing villains, and then he's kind of a villain in Ex Machina, like a really good one. Definitely a villain, actually. I take that back. He's definitely a villain in Ex Machina.
He's definitely the villain in Ex Machina.
But he made a turn. I don't know if it happened before Star Wars or with Star Wars, where he's now seen as a hero. And he does both so well. So you forget.
He does do both so well. It's a shame that the X-Men franchise did him so dirty in Apocalypse.
X-Men did a lot of people dirty.
Yeah, it did. But yes, Oscar Isaac, I think his role as Blue is such a great example. I think more audiences should focus on him as a villain or him as just an actor, because his range is way bigger than I think he's been given credit for. And I fall on that line too. I haven't given him a whole lot of credit. I've given him a lot of credit, but I think he deserves more.
Yeah.
And especially this role, because Jesus, that first confrontation where he's calling them out, telling them like, I know you're up to something. And he's like enforcing his power without actually enforcing that power.
Yeah.
It's very threatening and very unnerving. You feel gross. And his threat to Baby Doll is super But what strikes me, what makes me feel more uncomfortable aren't just the words or his pacing around the dressing room. It's his carelessness with people's personal bubbles. Yeah. That dude gets so up close to everyone in that room that it is like, I'm good with being close to people. Like, usually, okay, I can handle quite a bit. That motherfucker, I'm like, man, I would be like, right, I'm fucking gone. I'm I'm done. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but he commands that space very well.
He does. And I really think he deserves so much credit for this role. The movie's awesome, but that role is so good for him. I think it should be counted as one of his top characters. So yeah, and he's so scary in that scene threatening them that is where
Sweet Pea tries to call it off. She's like, okay, too much. Can't keep going. That doesn't last very long. So she gets back on board very quickly.
Pretty much immediately.
But then also Blondie, who has dark hair, which is confusing at first if you're not paying attention. You're like, who the hell is Blondie? Everybody's talking about Blondie. It's that girl. It's the dark hair girl.
It's Vanessa Hudgens.
Yeah. She is crying and confides in the doctor, the Madame Gorski character, and like kind of tells her, snitches on her what's going on. And so that's like a small thing, but you can just tell that it came out of him scaring the girls into that they should be loyal to him and all that stuff. So it is effective on at least a couple of them. Yeah. Even though they decide to continue. And so
sometimes you just got to get a little bit of the emotion out and then continue with
true.
The task at hand.
It's true. And so they go and dance for the chef to get the knife. And the chef we already know is that disgusting guy. But the way that they do it, they just kind of like I think there's more of an urgency now that they know they can't just keep like working under the radar. Yeah. That they actually have to move this along before they get caught, kind of thing. So now they're just like, sit down here, watch this girl dance, and we'll get on.
So their confrontation with Blue is really the first, like, okay, the plan, any plot, any story, if there's a big plan involved, they're gonna hit some hiccups if completely derail the plan completely. I said that twice. Anyways. So their first hiccup is that confrontation with Blue. Their urgency, as soon as they're like, all right, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Immediately, like, this is wrong. So, like, this is not going to work. Something bad will happen. You know that as soon as they, like, close the kitchen door, as soon as they're turning the music on.
It's rushed.
It's very rushed. You see Baby Doll like jump on the table, throw her jacket off so that she looks a little more seductive for the cook. And then you see the like faulty wiring and the liquid, the water on the floor. And immediately you're just like, oh shit.
Knock stuff off the table for her to dance on it. And now this water is slowly going towards this exposed wire.
Yeah. You're just like, you guys, you should like, call this one off or at least postpone, like regroup, reset. Rethink. They don't.
No, they don't. But you kind of forget about it because the action's so cool. And then when it actually happens, I think it's very effective. It's very cool the way it works out. So in the fantasy this time, the whole team of girls are on a train and they're fighting these like robots.
Dude, I love this robot fight. I really like this robot fight. And I like the fact that it's so like enclosed. Yes. I like that the fights are inside the train car. I like how it feels like the stakes are higher. It feels a little more like in your face up front with stuff.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I get that feeling as well. And their mission is to stop a bomb that's on the train before it gets to the city. Like this train is going towards the city. They need to defuse the bomb. And the only way it's like the other ones are pretty obviously connected to fire and a map. This one, the train or the bomb or something is like a jackknife. There's some knife related thing that's like in the real world you're getting a knife, but
it's not as obvious and everything about this fantasy fight sequence feels off. It looks really cool, but it feels off. But not like, the filmmakers mess something up. It's supposed to feel something's off. Because
not following the pattern.
Yeah, okay, that's a better way to put it. Yeah, it's not following the pattern, and you understand that.
Yeah.
As the viewer of like, oh man, it looks cool, but oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. So the they get towards the end, they get to the bomb, they defuse it. Everything seems to be going great because there's like 4 minutes left on the timer. You're like, this never happens in films. That's great.
Right.
And then the girls are supposed to fly away like on jetpacks. And Rocket's jetpack is damaged for one thing. And as they're about to like lift the bomb out of the train with the helicopter, a robot, like a half a robot, comes back and reactivates it basically.
Yep.
And then the cool part is back in the second layer of fantasy.
So we're back in the kitchen.
Yeah,
just
back in the
back
kitchen.
to the kitchen.
Good way to describe it. Back in the kitchen, the water reaches the cord, which is the radio playing Baby Doll's music, and cuts out the music. And so she stops dancing. The cook snaps out of his trance or power she had over him and notices that these girls are trying to steal the knife. And then it kind of cuts back in. The music turns back on, and so you're put back into the train. But you know that the chef's aware things are going badly now. Like he smacks the girls like this is bad.
Everything's bad now. Everything's bad.
Yeah. And so back in that world, the guy reactivated the bomb, turned the dial up. So now there's not 4 minutes. There's like a few seconds left. And so Baby Doll, it works out that Rocket forces Baby Doll to leave by like shooting the rope, and she kind of like saves her that way. And then also saves or tricks her sister Sweet Pea into flying away as well.
Well,
and
she saves Sweet Pea because Sweet Pea's like, I'll just put my rockets on full burn. I'll carry you out of here. But Rocket knows, hey, it's not gonna. Yeah, it can't hold.
And she's like, there's two things I need to tell you about that.
Yeah, you got to promise me two things. One, don't get mad about this. And she's like, mad about what? And she sets her rocket off and shoots her out of the train.
That's so great. I love that.
And then it cuts back to the kitchen. Well, first you see the train go into the city and you see the bomb blow.
Yeah. So they
effectively killing Rocket, and the mission has failed. And then it cuts to the kitchen. And you realize that, Rocket is actually dying. She's been stabbed. Yeah. And she is on the ground, like, bleeding out. But you don't see her bleeding out. You have that understanding because you see a quick shot of the stab wound. Yeah. And that's it. And then the suffering. Yeah. But you realize, like, all the girls understand they have failed. They have royally fucked up. Yeah. Because now Rocket is dead. Right. And the cook is super pissed off. He's kind of freaking out just a little bit because you get the sense he's the one that killed her. Right. And then in all the commotion, motherfucker Blue bursts through the doors again. Mm-hmm. Just when it can't get worse. Yeah. Yeah. And this, like, now he has had it with all of them. And he has an even more terrifying speech. And it all builds and builds and builds to him pulling a gun, and he threatens the doctor. He threatens the girls. He like freaks out. He separates the girls. He reminds everyone we got a show we got to get prepared for. Takes Sweet Pea to the closet, and then it cuts from the kitchen to their dressing room again. Oh my God! How did we miss the coolest shot?
What's the coolest shot?
The mirror shot. Where they are talking. It's like right before. Oh no, is this the mirror shot? Oh, son of a bitch. So the mirror shot where the girls are all talking. No, it's before this because Rocket is now dead and Rocket's in the mirror. Where it does that shot where the girls are talking and the camera like goes around. Yeah. And it goes past the mirror, and then you see the reflection. So what you thought was you watching like them, you were actually on the side of the reflection, and then it goes and you see. It's one of my favorite shots of the movie. I can't believe I forgot to bring it up earlier, but
But
anyways,
know what you mean.
Yeah. Then we go back to the dressing room after Rocket has passed Sorry,
the first time I watched the movie this week, actually, the mirror scene stood out to me because I was like, when this girl is talking, the girl in the mirror isn't exactly like synced, and I was like, something is different here, and I didn't know what it was until you said that, and I'm like, oh my god, this makes so much sense.
It's pretty cool. I really like how they did that. But yeah, so then they go back to the dressing room after Rocket has passed away. Everyone is high emotion, freaking out, and Blue shows back up. Takes his suit jacket off, which as soon as he takes his suit jacket off as he's talking, you're like, oh god. Like,
getting down to business.
This will probably be the most violent scene of the movie. And in terms of effective violence, or the kind of violence that's like makes you react to it, this is the most violent scene of the film.
Yes.
Yeah, his whole speech in this room of loyalty and reminding them that he owns them. He hits Dr. Gorski, knocks her down, pulls a gun. Which suddenly, having the gun introduced to the scene is very like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like he's probably going to kill someone right now, and we don't know who.
Right. And he threatens so many people with it, and Blondie breaks and admits that she like routed out the group and their mission and all this stuff. And then and he finds the list of items on the back of the chalkboard. He doesn't find the actual items, which is good. And he makes a fun note that they had crossed off the knife as soon as they like planned it out. He's like, oh, counted that chicken a little early, did we?
Right.
And then he pulls the gun on the back of Amber's head and shoots her. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't know that this was actually going this far. And so everybody freaks out. And then he also shoots Blondie because he said nobody likes snitches, which is she's the only girl that's actually loyal to you, and you killed her.
And you still killed her just because you hate snitches.
Yeah.
I think he actually kills her because if she snitched on the girls that she actually cares about, who knows what she would snitch on him, who he knows you hate me.
It's true.
So I think he's killing her as a form of closing a loose end, not just because she's a snitch. But yeah, seeing the two girls get killed, that's pretty like, holy shit. We just lost Rocket and we just lost Amber and Blondie. Like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. This is going sideways in a hurry.
At this point, is he going to kill the doctor? I don't think he's going to kill Baby Doll because she's his main attraction. So I don't think he'll kill her, but I could see him killing the doctor. He doesn't.
But he has broken that like barrier of murder. That's generally something that people don't do. He has done it. And so now when he doesn't threaten, he doesn't kill Baby Doll, but he does take the threat from earlier even further with her. And he talks about like how he's conflicted because he's going to make a bunch of money off her, like he's talked about before, but he feels like a kid who doesn't want to share his toys. And he's like watching all these other kids play with his toys. And the way he like delivers that dialogue is so intense. And so he's essentially wanting to take his toys and go home, meaning he wants to, rape Baby Doll and not share her with anybody. And it's even scarier. And the fact that what just happened makes you believe that he will do that. And and because of that, and because you didn't really see how the kitchen mission ended up, and because he had just said, oh, you failed to get the knife, you don't expect her to pull the knife and stab him in the neck.
Right. It turns out, so we forgot to mention, they've been collecting the items that they steal. They are hiding on the bottom side of one of the drawers. They're all taped to the bottom.
Right.
And the camera shows you that they actually did, in fact, still manage to collect the knife. And so she's like trying to reach for it. And I love it when she stabs him. It's such a like unusual spot for the bad guy to get stabbed in. It's such a like, it feels more emotional, more spontaneous instead of stabbing him in the gut or directly to the side of the throat, stabbing him like here at the top of the shoulder. It's such a
yeah.
like,
and it's a good effort. I mean, you're close to that. You have an artery in there. Like that's a good call to go for that instead of just like in the tummy or something.
And it's effective enough. So you see him like drop and she sprints out. But the last image you see of Blue is like him dropping to the ground and suffering. So your brain is like, oh, did she kill him? Like, did she pull that off?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But so they have the 4 things that they need, that they think they need, because she's forgotten the mysterious secret 5th thing. And so Baby Doll and Sweet Pea, the only 2 left, use those items to try to escape. So they are sneaking through the a club or a asylum or whatever.
Yeah.
And
you should probably Baby Doll goes and collects Sweet Pea from the closet and tells her like, we're the only 2 left. Because remember, he has locked Sweet Pea away.
Yeah.
In this dingy, nasty closet. And they use their items. You get to see them actually utilize the 4 items. So the knife's already been utilized.
Yeah, but they did need it. Luckily, the wise man was right. They start a fire, and the fire, for safety reasons, opens all the doors, and so they can get out. And then, and they use the map to navigate and avoid the guards and stuff. And then they get out into the courtyard, and they can't get past the guards outside. And that's when Baby Doll remembers, oh, yeah, I'm the 5th thing. I need to sacrifice myself for you, Sweet Pea. You need to escape for us and live a life for everybody here that couldn't, basically.
Mm-hmm. And that's when you also find out that the whole story hasn't actually been Baby Doll's, but it's actually Sweet Pea's story. Because she flat out tells her, like, it's not mine. This is all about you and trying to get you out of here and to have a life. Mm. And Sweet Pea's kind of like reluctant. It feels you connect to Sweet Pea because you understand on the one hand, you're like, you can't let Baby Doll do this to herself because the outcome is guaranteed not good.
Yeah.
But you got to get out of there as almost like so that the death of all the other girls, especially your sister, is not for nothing.
Right.
There has to be a victory here, but how do you weigh that victory? And I like that Baby Doll just flat out tells her, like, just go. Like, I'm about to go and do this anyway, so you need to go and do this. Mm-hmm. Like, I like that there's not a huge emotional separation from the 2. I like that it's very
debate.
Cut and dry. You're going to go do this because I'm headed out right now. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have a choice. Go live a good life. And it does a really good job of like doing that with Baby Doll. Snyder does this kind of slow-mo of her walking out to show herself to the guard. She kicks the one in the nuts, which you're like, kick him harder. And Sweet Pea gets out of the gate. It's like one of the most fulfilling parts of the movie is seeing Sweet Pea on the outside of the Lennox house or outside the brothel.
Right. And then unfortunately for Baby Doll, after she kicks that guy in the nuts, she gets knocked the fuck out.
Yep. And depending on if you watched the PG-13 theatrical release or the Snyder extended cut, because this whole scene was omitted.
Oh, really? I didn't get around to watching the theatrical one.
Yeah, so the high roller is not in the theatrical cut. WB had originally wanted Snyder to trim the scene down because they thought it was too uncomfortable. But when he trimmed it down as they asked, it came across super rapey and gross. And Snyder hated that it took away a lot of the narrative, especially pertaining to what his metaphor for the high roller was.
Right.
And kind
Which
of
is
the deal that they make.
It's very important and shockingly, you expect it to be rapey and it's shockingly not.
Yeah.
It's more meaningful than that.
There's a whole deal made between Baby Doll and the high roller that Snyder, instead of having it look creepy and rapey and gross, he took the whole sequence out of the film because he felt like I can't cut this down and still maintain the narrative I wanted. So he just took the whole thing out. So watch the extended cut for this scene, because it's actually really important, especially where it leads to.
It's the most important scene, in my opinion, because of its direct meaning to the whole lobotomy and the whole end of the movie, and her motivation and her agreement that she makes with the High Roller is felt in reality with the doctor who lobotomized her.
So he has this whole monologue speech of, I've paid so much, like a small fortune to get you here with me. I'm supposed to just take you, but I can't think of anything more offensive, which I love hearing him say that. Yeah. It's still kind of creepy that he's there and all that. So I'm not trying to like justify the actions of the world or whatever.
But you as an audience are so uncomfortable at this moment that it's a little bit of a relief. You're like, okay, as long as like, this isn't going to get super rapey all of a sudden, this might be okay, but we're still a little cautious.
And he literally just talks to her. All I want is a moment of truth with you. I want just the real you. I don't want you to feel forced. I want you to be on the same page with me. And he tells her, here's what I can give you. I can give you freedom. And he lists every little piece of freedom that he can give her. Yeah. And she's kind of quietly absorbing it and understanding the High Roller is essentially the way out of this fantastical hell that she's been in, having to fight in. And she's also at a moment where she understands the mission was completed. Right. They were victorious. They won. She just has to play out the finality of it. And I like that their exchange to me is very interesting. They do like make out a little bit, you know, she does lay down and he continues to talk to her about freedoms. So you get a little like, how old is John Hamm compared to Emily Browning? That's a little, but then it cuts. And the first thing you see is it cuts to the sound of the hammer hitting the tool and him pulling it back and being like, that was weird. Yeah. And suddenly you are back in reality. You are back to the beginning of the film with a full, like, holy shit, everything we've watched, not just the dance or the dance / fight sequences, but the entirety of this movie has been in her mind in this split second, which is one of my favorite things that Snyder chose not to do a like flashback, the life flashing before your eyes before, like whether you're dead or this, but she created this whole persona, this whole world where she could find like strength and find, I guess, a warrior inside of her, kind of a piece of all this. I really like that a lot. I really like that.
I like that a lot too. I think it's brilliant the way that it's done. I think that it all ties together in such a great way. And I think especially, I love John Hamm's character and how he plays kind of both sides, where he's a little scary, a little older, but also very charming and disarming and seductive in a way that you would understand it, feeling more, I guess, like you believe him, which is important. But then on the other side, after he does lobotomize her, the way he's like shocked, he's like, "Did you see that? Like the way she looked at me, and that was weird. Like there was just a flash of." Like you mentioned before, a moment of honesty, a moment of truth in her eyes that she did essentially agree or approve or give herself to him.
Well, he gives you kind of the sense that he has had to lobotomize several of these women over however long, and none of them have been okay with it or on board with it. And
none of them wanted him to do it.
Yeah, and this is the first one. He recognized that in her eyes, that it was like she wanted me to do it. It was like she was okay with this happening.
Yeah.
And that's when like the bigger reveal starts coming out where the doctor finds out, oh, the lobotomies have all been forged, and she starts learning about the abuses that have been happening.
Mm-hmm.
It gets a little frightening though, again. Just when you think like, hey, we're on a cool down, Snyder's like, you know what? We need one more little like, and you find out that
Blue did not die.
Blue did not die. In fact, he looks super pissed off, and although the fantasy version of him is so like gross and hyper intimidating and all that, when you see him as an orderly, especially now, I still look at him as like, you might be scarier than the fantasy version of yourself now than what she saw you as, because now it's like real and you've been injured and you've been almost exposed to all this. And you find out that he's kind of like creeper in love with her.
Yeah. Well, he's not the boss like he is in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
He's an orderly who's doing things on the down low, wanting to be like a boss, but also kind of a sniveling, shadowy guy.
He's such a piece of shit.
And it is what you just said, gross. But I also love that scene where they take her back to her room, and he is kind of, like you said, in love with her, where he's like trying to kiss her. She's not kissing him back. He's even trying to like choke her, and she's not reacting.
Man, when he puts his hand on her throat, it's so like,
yeah, it is. It is. But the more I like watch it, and the more I watch it, the more I like how bothered he is by her not reacting, that he has no control over her anymore. He can't scare her. He can't control her. He can't do anything to her because.
And I agree with you on that too. He's still just so gross.
Yeah,
he's so gross at that part. But I do like him breaking down and having that like fear and desperation and kind of that loss of, oh shit, I can't scare her to do what I want her to do. And then the cops burst in and you're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. And there's kind of like, I guess, regret on his part that she's like this because of what he did.
Yeah.
And he's responsible for it. But it turns out he actually didn't want that. He has to learn the hard way that that's not what he wanted. And so he has to deal with the consequences. That's always a good thing. And then he really deals with the consequences when the doctor shows up and is like, this guy's molesting these girls and forcing her to have lobotomies. And so you get some justice. That's good.
What I also really like, it's real quick in the background of the scene because you're focusing on him getting arrested and they're trying to like force him out. You got Dr. Gorski standing in the room too, kind of looking horrified because she just learned like, this guy just signed, he's supposed to be helping me take care of these women, and he's actually been abusing them in who knows how many ways. But in the background, you see it real quick. All the other orderlies are also arrested, and they're being escorted down the hall.
Nice. Yeah.
Which I'm like, it's awesome that he gets his, but it's also a good feeling knowing that the other guys are also being he wasn't alone, and so it has to be a complete sweep. So it's one of those times, and it kind of got me thinking of like other movies where you see the bad guy get their own, and they have like goons and stuff. How often do you actually see the other goons get taken down as well? Maybe not like shot up or whatever, but actually serve the, I guess, technically correct justice, if you will. You know, they're about to have to face it.
Complete
and you don't see that very often. It's usually just, hey, the main bad guy got taken down. That means all the other guys will, like, you assume, follow suit. But it's nice when you see it actually happen.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So the end, after that, the end is Sweet Pea, who has escaped. She's kind of out in the real world. She's getting on a bus, and she's stopped by the cops before she gets on, and you're like, oh shoot, she's obviously escaped from this facility.
Well, yeah, and you know the cops know this because Dr. Gorski made the comment of like, hey, this one helped another patient escape. So when you see the cops pull up to the bus stop, you immediately are like, they're trying to find the escaped patient because you don't know what Sweet Pea was ever in the Lennox house for. No one talks about anything that brought them to that place.
Right.
I kind of assume they all share the same background, but we're about to debate that, or not debate, but dive into that. She's like getting stopped by the cops, and then the bus driver stops the officers, and it turns out it's the wise man, but now he's a bus driver, like an innocent looking bus driver who's like, she's been a joy the whole time.
And he says she can't have anything to do with what you're doing around here because she's been on the bus the whole time. She just got off to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And she's getting back on, and they're like, oh, okay. And they leave. But yeah, it is extremely interesting that the wise man is the driver of the bus because you have only ever seen him on that third level deep dance vision with the girls, not in this reality with the girls. And so I think that's what you were referring to at the beginning or earlier when you were like, is this real, or is he actually there, or what does that mean? Did
Sweet Pea actually like manage to escape, or are we still in a fantasy world? Is Baby Doll fantasizing that Sweet Pea, this is Sweet Pea's future? But it also brings up, because so that's the end of the movie. They drive off. You hear extra narration about like who creates these obstacles, who has the power to like fight them, control them, power to do all this like huge affirming things in life. And you get a quick whisper of it's you, and now fight. But
my favorite is when she says, who chains us? And who holds the key to set us free?
It was so funny watching this, Jake, because it brought me back to so many things that you and I talked about the first Matrix. And I was like, and then with how the cast and crew kind of tagline this movie, I was like,
One Flew Over the Matrix.
I was like, man, they do share some very like similar theological or philosophical like aspects of we create like these cages for our own minds. We have to learn how to break them. We have to learn we are the ones that create, so we have to break them.
Right.
It made me like, oh man, this is like crazy how they share pretty similar ideas.
Yeah, we have more power than we can even imagine if we can just believe in ourselves.
Right. Like, what are we actually capable of? Because it's got to be pretty spectacular. But interesting decision points, and this is where the debates really come up, is post lobotomy, you don't see Baby Doll's face. Now, could that have been done so that you don't see like the broken face or the trickle of blood that you assume is there? Or is that actually Sweet Pea? And the fantasy element is just, that's what's going through her head as she's being like led away from where she just got lobotomized.
Right.
What was real? What wasn't? Post lobotomy.
It is, I think, debatable, and that's part of why it's so cool. But I, from what I recall, you do have, there's a big gap. And I think that's very interesting that from the lobotomy on, the whole time she gets the lobotomy, she's walking back to her cell, the whole interaction with Blue, the awkward, like choking and kissing that we talked about, all of that stuff you don't see her face for. But I thought that you do see her at the very end. Do you not?
No, you do, but it also like it's also kind of
it's just like mysterious.
So she's very clean. Time. She looks like she's back in the fantasy world, like version. Okay. So it still leaves you with a sense of
that really her?
Is that really her or what? I like the debate for it. I will tell you my personal feeling is that Sweet Pea actually does escape, and that her getting on the bus is kind of the reality for Sweet Pea. Like, that is actually Sweet Pea leaving. Because I want to lean towards the victory side of Sweet Pea got out of that environment, and she, whatever is ahead of her, who knows? It could be disastrous for her, but who knows?
Sure.
You just hope she makes it to her mom to tell her, "Hey, Rocket says she loves you."
It's at least hopeful going forward. I think that has to be how it goes, because it would be antithetical to the film for it to somehow like have a twist ending where she didn't escape, or she was in Baby Doll's mind, and Baby Doll's like still locked up, just lobotomized. That would not fit the entire story that's been told, not just the story of these girls, but the message to the audience that's been going on is that you can do this, you can escape, you have all of the weapons you need to get out of this situation. So I think the hero needs to, or the main character needs to escape at the end in order for that to be completed.
And I agree with you. Now, what's funny is when I watched it, hoping for the definitive, like, all right, she got out, right? Snyder laughs and even says, like, it's been open for debate. And then he moves on. And he's like, so that's the end of the movie. Thanks for doing this with me. You're like, fucking goddamn it. So I choose to stick with the more hopeful conclusion to the story.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of just the old man or the wise man being the bus driver, although showing up previously. I like just saying, you know what, fun coincidence. Of course, they're going to throw him back into the real world.
He's a friendly face. He's the only one that can really span space and time because he's not a real person. I think he's actually, now that I think about it, the very beginning, when she has that whole monologue about guardian angels, she talks about how they can take several different forms. They can be a young girl or an old man. I think that's just another manifestation of her guardian angel. I'm with you on that one. I think he's the actual guardian angel, just kind of being like, I'm still here. Friendly face at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Sucker Punch. I think we covered quite a bit, man.
Yeah.
I really do.
We were very thorough, I think.
We were super thorough on this. I'm checking my notes, and wow, we hit like all the notes. Fun fact, this was Vanessa Hudgens. Jamie Chung, this is her favorite personal movie that she's made.
Oh, nice.
On a different, not so happy, nice note, the poor reception was so great to this film that it caused Jenna Malone to almost quit acting entirely.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, that's kind of tragic because this movie does not deserve the hate that it's received. It really doesn't. I think it's such a cool movie. Visually, it's stunning. It's so good. But the story is so... it's crazy dark. It makes you feel gross at times, but it's supposed to. And I think it serves a really good purpose. I love the narrations of reminding you, like, you understand you have all this in front of you. You are able, whatever the situation is, you have the ability to fight through it. You just have to make the choice to fight through it. And I understand some things you can't just simplify that easily, but there's still, you have to find the will to fight. What you do with it after that is up to you.
And it's told in such life is not that simple, but the message and the moral of the story is simplified to a point that it can apply to everybody in every situation. And your weapons can be anything, and your situation can be anything, and you have to fight because you are the most capable. You're the most responsible for yourself.
Yeah, and you're important. We're all like, I mean, that I love that the movie really focuses. you follow Baby Doll thinking that she's the like main character, the hero, whatever, and you find out no, she's not. This has actually been Sweet Pea's story the whole time, but all the girls serve great purposes. Everyone's super important, and it's really I think the movie is just so underappreciated, and it should be appreciated. It's a great film.
Yeah,
not just as a Snyder fan. It's a great film.
It is. It really is. I obviously don't know Jenna Malone, and I don't know how she felt about that situation, but I could understand or picture caring about this story and believing in the project so much and being excited about it. And then for it to get that criticism so strongly and immediately from people that probably haven't seen it based on what they're describing, it can be, I imagine, very discouraging. And that these people just don't get it. What's the point in even like working so hard and believing in something so perfectly if it's going to fall on deaf ears or whatever. Right. And so I think that everybody gets discouraged, and that's certainly not a bad thing. I'm glad that she's continuing to act for sure. But I also get it. I mean, people are dumb. That's
they can be very dumb. They can be very, very dumb. Yes.
Yeah. But the great thing about movies is that they exist forever after they're out, and people like two idiots on the internet can come along 12 years later, 11 years later, and love it and have enjoyed it for years and appreciate the hell out of what you did to make it.
I've come across some people. I've got a few friends back home in Colorado that I know love this movie, and I haven't even told them that this was the one that we're diving into this week. So I'm excited for them to find that out, because I know they will be like completely on board. I've loved hearing them talk about how much they love it and why. And it always boils down to the movie does such a great job of showing the necessity of continuing the fight to live, and like what you need to do, gathering the tools that you need for it, whatever they may be, and just continuing that fight, not being super discouraged from it, even when it like blows up in your face, but continuing to move on. I think the movie is a lot more powerful than people give it credit for. And I like that audiences, like you said, are starting to revisit it and appreciate it, find appreciation for it. And hopefully it continues to build, because I think it deserves it, man. It's so good.
Yeah. Underrated gem for sure.
Yeah. But that's Sucker Punch, folks. Let us know if you've seen it, if you didn't see it, because you thought everyone hated it, so you skipped it, but you should go revisit it or whatever. Chime in. Obviously, we always want to hear from everyone.
Yeah, if you revisit it just because we recommended it and liked it or not, we want to hear from you. So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere.
All the stuff.
Yeah, comment or DM. We like talking to you. Next week's episode
should be kind of fun and interesting.
Yeah, you hinted at it before. I noticed end of last year that Soylent Green, which is a crazy movie from the 70s that a lot of people have not seen, it takes place in the year 2022. And so I was like, oh, well, we'll definitely do a Soylent Green episode next year. And then I realized there's actually a weirdly amount of movies that were put out in the 70s, 90s, early 2000s that take place in 2022. So we're going to go through 10 of them, I think.
Yep.
10 different movies that take place in 2022. Some of them are really interesting because they imagined a world that is very different than what we're actually in. And some of them are scary because they imagined a world that's exactly what we're in right now. So it will be very interesting.
Yeah, when art predicts reality, we'll get to it. It also sparks up the question of dating movies, which was another thing that I was kind of hinting to. We're going to talk about, should you date films? I have a pretty strong opinion about that. Jake already knows what it is, but we'll get into that next week. It should be interesting. I've only, looking at the list, I was like, man, I've only seen a couple of these. I don't know what I'm in store for with the rest of them.
Yeah, there's a weird a weird Mark Hamill movie from the '90s that looks fun that I've never seen. Yeah, it'll be a good time.
It'll be a good time. So that'll be fun comparing those movies to current times, the real 2022. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that one will have some pretty funny us moments.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I can't wait for you to watch the fuck. This is what happens when I say things off the cuff. Who's that girl from Mean Girls? Obviously the main redheaded girl from Mean
Lindsay
Girls.
Lohan?
Yeah, there's a Lindsay Lohan movie on that list that just came out recently.
There is?
Yes, it's the Among the Shadows movie.
Oh man, that might be the first one I watch. Did you hear she's trying to make a comeback?
This seems like it is what that is. This seems like a comeback movie, but it's not one that you would probably want to make a comeback with.
All right. I heard she's going to be making some rom-com for like Hallmark or something like that. And I was like, okay. Well,
this Among the Shadows is a very interesting movie.
Right.
I'll say that.
Yep.
Tune in next week.
So that'll be next week. If anything, watch Soylent Green.
Oh boy. It's a classic.
It is. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that's it, right?
Yep. That should
cool.
do it. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.